Gunfire shatters the peaceful morning in a small American town as ruthless outlaws ambush a school bus full of innocent kids, just when it looks like no one can save them. Evelyn Hawkins, an unassuming bus driver and retired Marine sniper, steps out of the shadows and into a life-or-death showdown. Think Clint Eastwood's gritty bravery meets the tactical brilliance of a Navy SEAL. Armed only with her combat-hardened instincts and fierce determination to protect the children, Evelyn turns the tables on a violent gang that picked the wrong target. Folks, buckle up because this action-packed thriller will keep you on the edge of your seat right to the explosive finish. If you love stories about courage under fire, heroic veterans, and the triumph of American grit, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Now you won't want to miss a second of this incredible tale. The late summer sun casts long shadows across the dusty roads of Maplewood County, a serene region known for its rolling wheat fields and quaint Main Street. At first glance, nothing out of the ordinary ever seemed to happen here. Folks spent their days tending to farms, running local shops, and carrying on small-town traditions that stretched back generations. One of the most familiar sights was the bright yellow school bus making its daily route, picking up children from scattered farmhouses and dropping them off at the single-story elementary school just off the main highway. Most townspeople knew the driver simply as Mrs. Hawkins, a reserved and polite woman in her mid-30s, who wore her auburn hair in a neat ponytail. She had a welcoming smile for every child who climbed onto the bus each morning. But Maplewood's calm exterior concealed more than one hidden truth. The recent arrival of a rowdy motorcycle gang rumored to be dealing in stolen goods, and worse, had stirred quiet unease among the townsfolk. People whispered over coffee at the local diner that these outlaws had taken over an abandoned barn on the outskirts of town, though the gang kept mostly to themselves. Their presence felt like a storm cloud hovering on the horizon, threatening to break at any moment. So far, local law enforcement had stayed back, lacking evidence to confront them directly. Yet tensions were rising. A few nights earlier, a young farmhand claimed he saw suspicious figures lurking around his boss's property, scoping out the fields as if searching for something or someone. Evelyn Hawkins, the Mrs. Hawkins of the school bus, was far from oblivious. Each day, from behind the large windshield of her bus, she observed the changing landscape and those who roamed it. Beneath her unassuming exterior lay years of specialized military training and real-world experience. In a past life, she was Sergeant Evelyn Monroe of the United States Marine Corps, a respected sniper with tours in conflict zones around the globe. After returning to civilian life, she had chosen this small community as her refuge. Driving a bus for the local school brought her a sense of daily purpose and peace, far removed from the adrenaline-laced missions she once endured. She had told almost no one about her service, and her calm, collected demeanor gave little away. Yet day by day, she noticed how the tension in Maplewood was quietly ratcheting up, the new bikers cruising in from nowhere. The lowered gazes at the grocery store, whenever one of them strode in, the hushed concerns from parents about kids roaming too close to the outskirts. Evelyn's instincts told her that something was brewing. Despite all appearances, Maplewood wasn't as isolated from danger as it once was. The presence of the outlaw gang felt like a fuse waiting to be lit, and her gut warned her that the situation could escalate. She hoped the whispers were overblown. After all, she'd found a measure of peace in Maplewood that she believed she could never have found elsewhere. But old habits die hard, and she kept a watchful eye on the horizon every morning, anticipating that one day her quiet world might be shattered. She had sworn off violence, but if the safety of her kids or any innocent life were threatened, she knew exactly what she was capable of. A midweek morning dawned cool and drizzly, the kind of weather that made the pavement glisten with faint reflections of sunrise. Evelyn guided the school bus along her usual route, stopping at small farmhouses where children waited by the roadside under large umbrellas. She greeted each of them by name, got after their parents, and offered a kind remark on their new shoes or backpacks. She treated the youngsters like extended family, genuinely caring about their well-being. Over the past year, the local families had come to trust her implicitly. She was punctual, always mindful of safety, and empathetic to each child's needs. Despite the routine, Evelyn couldn't help scanning the fields and edges of the road for anything out of place. Her military training had hardwired her to notice small details. The flick of a curtain when someone peered outside fresh tire tracks in the mud that hadn't been there the day before, or a lone motorcycle parked under a copse of trees. She told herself she was being paranoid. This was Maplewood after all. Yet she also knew that trouble often crept in quietly, masked by the comfort of everyday life. That very morning, she spotted something unsettling. As the bus lumbered past a wide bend, she glimpsed two strangers leaning against a battered SUV off in the distance. They were dressed in leather jackets and heavy boots, their silhouettes partially obscured by morning mist. One raised an arm, pointing in the direction of the bus. Evelyn's heart gave a slight jolt. No one else seemed to notice. The kids were busy chatting about their upcoming field trip to a nearby nature reserve. She tried to brush off her unease, but made a mental note of the location near an abandoned grain silo, about a mile from the old barn, rumored to be the bikers' hideout. Once she reached the school's parking lot, she watched her precious cargo of kids shuffle off toward their classrooms, safe for another day. Turning off the ignition, she remained seated behind the wheel for a moment, mentally reviewing what she'd seen. Should she mention her sighting to the sheriff? The truth was, Sheriff Dalton had a reputation for being more talk than action. In a place like Maplewood, people believed in dealing with problems quietly, without stirring too much fuss, sometimes to their own detriment. Yet part of Evelyn itched to do something more. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she was no longer in uniform. Reporting unconfirmed suspicions might lead nowhere. However, Evelyn's restless mind wouldn't let go of the image of those two men pointing toward her bus. A swirl of unease settled in the pit of her stomach. She had no proof of wrongdoing, but she also believed in trusting her instincts. One thing was certain, she needed to keep a closer watch, not just for her own sake, but for the kids who relied on her daily. As the morning bell rang, Evelyn stepped off the bus and into the school's main office, quietly resolving to stay vigilant come what may. That afternoon, as classes dismissed for the day, a cold front rolled in, turning the sky a steely gray and sending gusts of wind across the school grounds. Parents in pickups lined up beside the bus to collect their kids. Evelyn nodded politely at a few she recognized well, exchanging quick conversations about next week's softball game or the upcoming parent-teacher conference. Though her face remained composed, her mind was churning. She found her gaze wandering across the parking lot, and she couldn't help but notice a lone motorcycle parked near the fence. It wasn't unusual to see a bike in Maplewood, but something about the black flames painted on the side stood out. She'd spotted a similar design on one of the jackets worn by the men near the old silo that morning. Before she could investigate further, a teacher waved to get her attention, beckoning her to speak with the principal. In the office, Principal Carson explained plans for a special field trip scheduled the next week, one that would require busing over 30 children to an ecology center nearly 50 miles away. Given Evelyn's flawless track record, the school trusted her wholeheartedly to handle the drive and keep the kids safe. She agreed to the assignment, forcing a polite smile. But inside, a new concern emerged. If that suspicious group was truly up to something, they might see a school bus full of kids traveling out of town as an easy target. She pushed the thought aside, hoping she was overreacting. Finishing the conversation, Evelyn walked back outside to see the bus's seats gradually filling with students. Many of the older kids were absorbed in their phones, while the younger ones excitedly chattered about the upcoming weekend. Even as she tried to appear relaxed, every nerve in her body was on alert. She did a quick head count, closed the door, and pulled away from the curb. The route home went smoothly at first, the children descending in small groups at various stops. Yet halfway through, she spotted something troubling in her side mirror. The same motorcycle she'd noticed earlier was following at a distance, never getting too close, but never backing off. Maintaining her calm, Evelyn continued her rounds. Street by street, children hopped off, racing toward their homes. As her load lightened, she noticed the bike occasionally slowing down when she did, as if taking interest in who was left on the bus. Only when she turned onto a gravel side road by the Johnston farm did the motorcycle speed up and roar away. Evelyn sighed in relief, but couldn't shake the feeling that her bus had been surveilled. Once the last child was safely dropped off, she parked the bus in the depot and made her way to her pickup truck. She decided that after dinner she would do a little reconnaissance of her own. No one needed to know. This was Maplewood's problem, and if the law wouldn't handle it, maybe her old skill set would prove useful in ensuring everyone stayed safe. Later that evening, Evelyn quietly slipped out of her modest ranch-style home. She had changed out of her usual jeans and flannel shirt into attire better suited for sneaking around unnoticed. Dark cargo pants, a hooded jacket, sturdy boots that muffled her steps. The old habits of her Marine Corps days came rushing back as she checked her gear, a small flashlight, a multi-tool, and a pair of binoculars. She left her pickup truck in the driveway, opting instead for an off-road motorcycle she'd kept in her barn. It was less conspicuous, especially if she needed to move quietly through fields or woodland trails. Her destination was the abandoned barn, rumored to be the hideout for the outlaw bikers. She had traced a route along the outskirts of several farm properties to approach from behind, hoping to avoid any guards or lookouts. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint smells of hay and moist earth. As she neared the barn's perimeter, she heard the distant hum of engines, multiple ones. Slowing her bike, she parked behind a cluster of trees, hiding it under thick shrubs. Heart pounding lightly, she approached the barn on foot. Moonlight illuminated a row of motorcycles parked haphazardly outside. Several large men wearing leather vests milled around, their raucous laughter echoing in the quiet countryside. A few more lounged on old crates, swigging from bottles that gleamed in the pale light. Evelyn crept closer, using the tall grass for cover. Her ears caught snippets of conversation. Mentions of the bus route, timing, and something big. She carefully inched sideways to position herself behind a broken window where she could get a glimpse inside the barn. Through her binoculars, she spotted a man hunched over a makeshift table, studying what appeared to be a map. Another stood guard at the barn doors, a shotgun slung across his shoulder. The tension in Evelyn's stomach coiled tighter with each second. These men weren't just a ragtag group of thrill-seekers. They were planning something. She strained to hear more, catching fragments like transport the goods, easy leverage, and crucially the kids. Her pulse quickened. While the details were murky, it was clear they intended to use the school bus or the children on it for some illicit purpose. Perhaps it was a ransom plan, or maybe they intended to hijack the bus as a cover for smuggling. Either way, the children were in danger. As she slowly backed away, one of the bikers inside lurched toward the window. She froze, pressing herself flat against the barn's exterior wall. For a few heart-pounding moments, she feared she'd been spotted. The man stomped outside to relieve himself, but thankfully wandered in the opposite direction. Evelyn took the opportunity to slip away, carefully retracing her path to her hidden motorcycle. Once back on the bike, she revved the engine just enough to break through the night's silence without drawing attention. The ramifications of what she'd heard weighed heavily on her mind. She knew she had to protect those kids, and she also knew that the sheriff might not grasp the threat's urgency. For Maplewood's sake and for her own peace of mind, Evelyn realized there was no turning back now. When Evelyn finally returned home, the clock read just after midnight. She had to be up at dawn to drive the morning route. Yet sleep felt impossible. Her thoughts churned as she recounted every word she overheard. She placed a call to an old friend, Corporal Darnell Reed, who had served with her in the Marines. He now lived 2 states over, running a private security firm specializing in threat assessments. Darnell picked up on the second ring, sounding gruff and half asleep. But as soon as he heard the seriousness in Evelyn's voice, he was fully alert. She explained the situation. An outlaw gang appeared to be planning something involving the school bus and the children. She needed advice on how to proceed without causing a panic that might put the kids at even greater risk. Darnell offered to drive over in a few days and provide backup. But that left a critical gap in time. The field trip was approaching quickly, and her gut told her the gang might strike sooner than later. "Keep eyes on them, but don't engage unless you have to," Darnell cautioned. "And for God's sake, let the local authorities know something's up." Evelyn sighed, knowing the sheriff would likely dismiss her concerns unless she produced hard evidence. Still, she promised Darnell she'd consider talking to law enforcement if the threat escalated. Hanging up the phone, Evelyn sat at her small kitchen table, the overhead light casting a warm glow on her worried face. She absent-mindedly traced the faint scars on her forearm, remnants of her time in combat. Memories flickered of missions where she had to stay hidden for days, meticulously studying a target before making a single move. That same disciplined patience guided her now, though the stakes felt even higher. Innocent children's lives, she shuddered at the thought of them being used as pawns. By 4 a.m., she'd formulated a plan. First, she'd collect more intel, making sure to document anything suspicious. Second, she'd craft a discreet warning for the principal and parents without broadcasting panic. Finally, if push came to shove, she'd use her skills to fortify the bus route, scouting vantage points, potential ambush sites, and safe back roads for evacuation. She brewed a strong cup of coffee and tried to settle her nerves. The first slivers of dawn were creeping across the horizon by the time she grabbed her keys and headed to the bus depot. Exhaustion tugged at her eyelids, but adrenaline kept her alert. As she drove the empty bus out of the depot, she double-checked all the mirrors, scanning for any sign of a tail. Today she would watch for anomalies more keenly than ever. The children would be boarding soon, oblivious to the hidden storm gathering on the town's outskirts. Evelyn vowed to do everything in her power to ensure they remained safe and ignorant of the danger, preserving their innocence for as long as possible. She couldn't fail them, not after what she had seen, and deep down, a part of her almost welcomed the confrontation. If these outlaws intended to threaten her kids, they had no idea what kind of fight they were about to start. The next morning unfolded under a sky streaked with gold and coral, a deceptive beauty that belied the tension beneath. Evelyn guided the bus along the winding roads, stopping at each dusty driveway to pick up the children who awaited her with sleepy eyes and backpacks clutched in small hands. The gentle hum of conversation and occasional bursts of laughter filled the bus, bringing a temporary sense of normalcy. Yet Evelyn couldn't ignore the nagging awareness of every passing vehicle, every shape on the horizon. As she pulled up to one of the last stops, she noticed a black SUV idling on the shoulder far ahead. At first, it could have been any parent waiting for their child, but there was something about the tinted windows and the way the engine rumbled that made her uneasy. The SUV drove off as soon as she approached, taking a sharp turn down a side road. Though she couldn't be certain it belonged to the outlaw gang, the coincidence was unsettling. The kids were more excited than usual that morning, chattering about a mini talent show planned for recess. One of the older boys, Lucas, told Evelyn he was practicing a card trick he wanted to show everyone. She smiled and gave him an encouraging nod, doing her best to mask her worries. If the outlaws were indeed scouting the bus route, the children must remain oblivious for their own comfort. Fear, once seated, could grow uncontrollably in a young mind. When they arrived at the school, Evelyn quickly parked the bus and headed inside to speak with Principal Carson. She laid out a carefully edited version of her concerns, mentioning she'd observed unfamiliar vehicles following her route and had heard rumors about the bikers near the old barn. She stopped short of revealing her nighttime reconnaissance or her background as a Marine sniper. Carson thanked her for the heads up, but seemed uncertain how to proceed. Officially, they could inform the sheriff, but without concrete evidence, it might lead nowhere. Still, Carson agreed to increase general security around the school and to keep an eye out for suspicious activity. It wasn't the decisive action Evelyn had hoped for, but it was a start. Before leaving, Evelyn also spoke briefly with Mrs. Salinas, a fourth-grade teacher who was known for being particularly caring. She hinted that parents should be encouraged to remain vigilant, but not alarmed. Mrs. Salinas promised to spread the word diplomatically. The conversation ended with a mutual unspoken understanding. Maplewood might not be as safe as everyone once believed, returning to the bus. Evelyn felt a mixture of relief and frustration. At least she wasn't alone in her concerns now, but she also suspected that most people in Maplewood couldn't fully grasp the severity of the threat. She recalled the hushed voices she heard at the barn and the mention of the kids. It was enough to keep her adrenaline simmering. If the outlaws truly planned to target the children, time was running short. Evelyn resolved to intensify her efforts to gather proof. One way or another, she would confront the danger looming over Maplewood, no matter the cost. That afternoon, once classes let out, Evelyn repeated her route, dropping children off at their respective stops. Shadows grew long as the sun sank behind farm silos, and the chirping of cicadas began to fill the air. Near the edge of town, she caught sight of a battered motorcycle parked outside a dilapidated gas station. The rider, a wiry man with a tangled beard, seemed to be staring intently at the bus as she passed. Her spine tingled. There was no mistaking the gang's involvement now. When she finally parked the bus at the depot, she decided to take a detour on her way home, hoping to catch another glimpse of any suspicious activity. She chose a dirt road that wound through the fields, one that provided a vantage point of the barn. From a distance, carefully cresting a small hill, she saw 3 motorcycles lined up outside the barn doors. Their riders engaged in heated conversation with a fourth man who stood with his arms crossed. Through her binoculars, Evelyn recognized one of the men from the previous night. He was gesturing angrily at the other 3, as if berating them for some failure or complication. Although she couldn't hear their words, the tension in their body language spoke volumes. Unsure of how long she could remain without being noticed, Evelyn took a few quick photos with her phone. Then she crouched in the tall grass, her pulse pounding in her ears, waiting for an opportunity to leave. Undetected. Minutes felt like hours, but eventually the bikers went inside and slammed the barn doors. Evelyn used the moment of quiet to retreat, belly crawling, until she reached a safer distance. She made it back to her pickup truck, unseen, her heart still thudding. During the drive home, she mulled over her next steps. The photos provided some tangible evidence of the gang's presence, though it was still far from a smoking gun that they intended to threaten children. Nevertheless, it might be enough to convince the sheriff to at least take a look. Should she trust the local authorities or handle it herself? The Marine in her longed for swift, decisive action, but the bus driver in her understood she carried a responsibility to keep the children calm and out of harm's way. That evening, she prepared a simple dinner of grilled chicken and vegetables, trying to quiet her mind with the routine of cooking. She wondered if she should let the parents know more specifically about the dangers. But fear could spread quickly, and misinformation could lead to chaos. She recalled Darnell's advice to keep her eyes on the gang but to avoid direct confrontation unless necessary. For the sake of Maplewood's children, she might not have a choice soon. If these outlaws forced her hand, she was ready to show them that they had sorely underestimated the woman behind the wheel of that school bus, a woman trained to end conflicts swiftly and decisively by any means required. The following day, the atmosphere at the school felt increasingly tense, though few could pinpoint why teachers exchanged worried glances and the small talk in the corridors had a nervous edge. Word had gotten around, mostly rumor, partially fueled by the bits of caution Evelyn had shared. Parents began lingering longer at drop-off, asking subtle questions about security. Principal Carson tried to maintain a reassuring demeanor, but the concern in his eyes was evident. Evelyn stuck to her routine, but with heightened vigilance. After the morning drop-off, she took a moment to speak with the school janitor, Mr. Cole, who had also served in the military many years ago. Quiet and unassuming. Mr. Cole was a man of few words, but he had a sharp eye for detail. Evelyn discreetly asked if he'd noticed anything unusual around the school premises or the parking lot. He shook his head, but admitted he felt the same uneasy undercurrent that everyone else did. He promised to keep watch, especially during off hours, when the building was mostly empty. Leaving the school, Evelyn drove to the sheriff's office, her photos printed and tucked into a folder. Her conversation with Sheriff Dalton began cordially enough, but as she laid out her concerns and presented the images, his skepticism was obvious. He pointed out that none of the photos explicitly showed illegal activities, just a group of bikers standing around a barn. Evelyn pressed on, describing the overheard references to the kids and the bus route, but the sheriff seemed unconvinced. Without a direct threat or conclusive proof of wrongdoing, his hands were tied. Evelyn left the station feeling deflated, yet more determined. The law might not act until it was too late. That afternoon, an unexpected break came her way. One of the older students, a quiet and observant 8th grader named Mariah, approached Evelyn privately after school. Mariah mentioned that her older brother had fallen in with some shady bikers near the barn, and he'd been talking lately about a big score they planned to pull off. Soon, Mariah was worried sick, but didn't dare tell her parents. Evelyn's heart sank, yet she thanked the girl for her bravery in coming forward. She reassured Mariah she'd do everything possible to keep everyone safe. The conversation confirmed Evelyn's worst suspicions. The gang was planning an operation soon, and it almost certainly involved the children. With the field trip to the Ecology Center just days away, she suspected that might be the gang's target, trapping a bus full of kids on a remote highway far from immediate help. That evening, she locked herself in her small study, laying out maps of the area and cross-referencing potential ambush points. She identified narrow roads lined by dense woodland and noted which areas had poor cell reception. If she were planning an ambush, that's where she'd strike. By the time she finished, a grim plan formed in her mind. She would drive the bus on the field trip, but she'd be ready for war if the outlaws made their move. With time running short, Evelyn made one more call to Corporal Darnell Reed. She summarized the latest developments. The sheriff's dismissive response, Mariah's disclosure, in the looming field trip. Darnell listened carefully, his tone grim when he finally spoke. "I'm on my way. I can be there by Friday." While that left only a small window before the trip, his arrival offered a sliver of hope. Evelyn decided not to inform anyone else about Darnell's involvement. Fewer people knowing meant fewer chances for information leaks. In preparation, she combed through the local hardware stores for additional supplies. Zip ties, nylon rope, heavy-duty flashlights, items that could be passed off as everyday tools, but might prove invaluable in a crisis. She also paid a visit to a nearby gun shop run by an old friend named Hank. Officially, she told Hank she was taking up hunting as a hobby. He didn't pry. Maplewood was a tight-knit community, and if Hank noticed Evelyn's stern expression, he respected her privacy. With her new gear safely stashed, she returned home to finalize her contingency plans, though she had rarely touched a rifle since leaving the Marines. Evelyn still kept one locked in a trunk in her garage, along with a carefully maintained sniper scope. Late that night, she took it out, inspected every part, and assembled it with practiced ease. The motion stirred bittersweet memories. She recalled the discipline and pride she once felt as part of an elite military unit, tempered by the haunting recollections of missions that had taken lives. Her vow to leave that world behind echoed painfully, but she now saw no alternative. The outlaws had forced her hand, threatening innocence on her watch. Over the next few days, she made subtle adjustments to her bus routine, like switching up her route order and picking certain roads that offered multiple escape paths. Though no one seemed to notice, she felt a difference. Small steps to maintain the element of surprise if the worst happened. Meanwhile, the children's excitement for the field trip grew. They had no idea that hidden shadows lurked waiting for an opportunity to strike. When Friday finally arrived, Darnell rolled into town at dusk, driving an unmarked SUV with tinted windows. He brought along a trusted colleague, a former combat medic named Tara. The three of them gathered at Evelyn's ranch house under the cover of darkness. Over a simple meal, they swapped information and laid out a plan. Evelyn showed them her maps highlighting likely ambush sites. Darnell and Tara explained how they could set up a rolling escort hidden at a distance. Should trouble arise, they would move in swiftly. The plan was risky, hinging on the Outlaws making their move where Evelyn anticipated. As midnight approached, Evelyn, Darnell, and Tara double-checked gear-tested communication devices and steeled themselves for the day ahead. None of them wanted violence, but all three recognized that sometimes it was the only language criminals understood. The next morning, Maplewood's school bus would embark on a trip that could change the town forever. And if the Outlaws tried to take advantage, they would discover that Evelyn Hawkins was far more than just a polite bus driver. She was a retired Marine sniper, fully prepared to defend those under her care. Saturday dawned with a crisp, clear sky, a perfect day for a field trip, or so it seemed. Evelyn arrived early at the school, checking the bus thoroughly, tires, engine, emergency exits, first aid kit. Everything was in order. Her heart thumped a steady rhythm, partly from anticipation, partly from the heavy knowledge of what might unfold. Darnell and Tara were positioned in an inconspicuous vehicle, set to trail behind at a distance. If the Outlaws attempted anything, they would be ready to close in. By 8 o'clock, teachers and students began gathering. The kids, wearing bright smiles and backpacks full of snacks, were buzzing with excitement. Principal Carson offered Evelyn a nod of confidence. He'd arranged for one other staff member, a burly gym teacher named Mr. Hayes, to ride along for extra supervision. While Hayes had no military background, he was a reassuring presence. Evelyn welcomed the help, but she kept her deeper concerns to herself. The last thing she wanted was to escalate fear among the children or staff. They set off at 8:30, the bus rumbling out of Maplewood's modest downtown. Evelyn stuck to the predetermined route, heading north along a state highway that soon branched into narrower roads surrounded by thick forests. She kept one eye on the rearview mirror, another scanning the roadside for unusual activity. The kids sang songs and played guessing games, oblivious to any danger. Meanwhile, Darnell and Tara followed about half a mile behind, maintaining radio contact through earpieces. Every so often, Evelyn would tap the microphone hidden in her collar to send a quick update. For the first half of the journey, everything seemed normal. The bus navigated rolling hills and tree-lined lanes without incident. Some of the younger students pressed their faces to the windows, pointing excitedly at deer grazing in a clearing. Even Evelyn felt a small wave of relief. Perhaps the Outlaws had reconsidered, or maybe they were too disorganized to strike. Then came a sudden jolt. A loud pop echoed through the bus, followed by a flapping sound. The steering wheel jerked in Evelyn's hands. A tire had blown. She eased the bus to the shoulder. Heart pounding, Mr. Hayes urged the students to stay calm. It was a routine breakdown, he assured them. But Evelyn suspected sabotage. She discreetly pressed her collar mic, signaling Darnell. Flat tire, mile marker 47, check for threats. Outside, the morning air felt tense. As she inspected the tire, she saw a sharp piece of metal embedded in the rubber. It looked like a homemade spike, crudely fashioned yet effective. Someone had deliberately laid a trap. Evelyn's mind raced. Was this the gang's opening move, or a random act of vandalism? She glanced down the deserted road, no sign of any approaching vehicle. Then she caught a faint reflection in the tree line. Perhaps sunlight glinting off metal. Her senses went into overdrive. She hurried back onto the bus, telling Mr. Hayes to keep the kids calm. Evelyn got on the radio to confirm Darnell's position. The wait felt agonizingly long every second, stretching out as she worried that this might be the moment the Outlaws made their move. While Mr. Hayes initiated a game to distract the kids, Evelyn slipped outside, once more carefully scanning the tree line. That suspicious glint had vanished, but she trusted her instincts. Retrieving a spare tire was going to be a time-consuming process, exactly what an ambush team would count on. She radioed Darnell again. We need to change a tire fast. I saw something in the woods. Stay alert. His calm reply crackled through Roger that, we're about 2 minutes out, hold tight. Despite the tension, Evelyn maintained a composed front for the children. She retrieved the jack and spare from the bus's side compartment and started loosening the lug nuts. The plan was for Darnell and Tara to arrive in their SUV park a short distance behind and keep watch. But before they could arrive, the distant growl of motorcycles cut through the air. A trio of bikers appeared at the crest of the hill. As they drew closer, Evelyn recognized the black flames painted on one of the gas tanks, the same design she'd seen tailing her route earlier in the week. Her pulse quickened. She positioned herself between the bikers and the bus, ready to stall them if they tried anything. The lead biker, a tall man with a scar stretching across his cheek, slowed down and called out, "Need a hand, lady?" His tone was mockingly polite, and his eyes flicked toward the bus full of kids. The other two bikers circled around the engines, growling effectively, trapping the bus on the narrow shoulder. Evelyn raised a hand in a gesture of cautious acknowledgement, her mind racing through possible outcomes. Inside the bus, the children sensed something was wrong, and their excited chatter died down. Mr. Hayes stood near the front, shielding the curious eyes of the younger ones from the windows. Scarface dismounted, taking a few ominous steps toward Evelyn. She swallowed, striving for an air of confidence but not aggression. She didn't want to spook them into immediate violence. "Just a flat tire," she said evenly. "We've got it under control." He glanced over his shoulder at his companions. "Looks like you've got quite a load there," he sneered, eyes sliding back toward the bus. "Maybe we can give you an escort. Wouldn't want you folks to get stranded out here now. Would we?" The sarcasm dripped from his words, leaving no doubt about his real intentions. At that moment, Darnell and Tara's SUV crested the hill behind them, headlights flashing. Scarface tensed, measuring the newcomers. For a tense few seconds, no one moved. The standoff crackled with potential violence. Then Scarface smirked, tossed a mocking salute, and swung his leg back over his motorcycle. "We'll be seeing you around," he said, voice laced with threat. With that, the trio roared off down the road, leaving only a swirl of dust behind. Evelyn exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The adrenaline pulsed in her veins, but the children were still safe for now. Darnell and Tara jumped out of the SUV and hurried to help change the tire. Within minutes, the bus was back on four good wheels. Evelyn climbed into the driver's seat, silently vowing to keep moving, keep the kids protected. The field trip would go on, but so would her vigilance. Maplewood's peaceful facade was no more. She was deep in enemy territory, and this was only the beginning. The rest of the trip to the Ecology Center passed without further incident. Though a palpable tension lingered, Mr. Hayes kept the children entertained with jokes and stories, hoping to prevent them from dwelling on the unsettling encounter. Every now and then, Evelyn glanced in the rearview mirror, scanning for headlights or the glint of motorcycles. Darnell and Tara trailed a safe distance behind, radioing periodically to confirm no pursuers were visible. Though outwardly calm, Evelyn's mind churned with scenarios of what could happen next. Upon arrival, the children excitedly poured out of the bus, fascinated by the center's exhibits of local wildlife and native plant species. Despite her lingering worries, Evelyn forced a reassuring smile and stepped off to confer briefly with Darnell. They agreed that Tara would stay with the kids and teachers inside the facility, posing as a volunteer while Darnell would patrol the grounds in the SUV. Evelyn remained near the bus, keeping an eye on the parking lot and any newcomers. If the bikers attempted a surprise move here, they would find the place less isolated than the back roads. Hours passed, and the children's excited voices echoed through the nature trails and observation platforms. As the sun climbed high, Evelyn's shoulders slowly eased from their tense posture. Perhaps the confrontation earlier was a warning, not a direct attack. She felt a pang of guilt that the kids' joyful field trip was overshadowed by her constant vigilance. But she knew there was no alternative. By late afternoon, they had safely wrapped up the ecology program. The teachers gathered everyone back at the bus, and the group prepared for the return journey. Evelyn inspected every inch of the vehicle once more, finding no signs of tampering. The ride home began smoothly. The children, tired from a full day of learning and play, dozed off or gazed contentedly out the windows. Mr. Hayes chatted with Tara, who had joined them on the bus for the trip back, while Darnell took point in the SUV ahead, scanning the road for potential threats. Evelyn kept the radio line open, exchanging updates every few miles. As they neared Maplewood's outskirts, a collective sigh of relief seemed to fill the bus. They were almost home, and despite the tense run-in with the bikers, the day had gone relatively well. Evelyn slowed down as they approached the final stretch of highway, noticing that Darnell's SUV had pulled off to the side. Her earpiece crackled. "Seeing something up ahead," Darnell said, his voice cautious. "Car accident, maybe. Looks like a van in the ditch." Sure enough, around the bend stood a battered white van, its front end jammed into a ditch. Two men stood beside it, appearing to wave for help. Evelyn felt a spike of unease. This could be another trap. She relayed the situation to Tara and Mr. Hayes, instructing them to keep everyone calm. As she gently applied the brakes, the bus slowed to a crawl, inching toward the scene. Darnell exited his SUV and approached the men cautiously. Within seconds, her earpiece hissed with urgency. "They've got guns." Instinct kicked in. Evelyn stomped on the accelerator, swerving the bus to block any line of fire to Darnell. She shouted for everyone to stay down. Tara and Mr. Hayes dropped to the floor, shielding the kids with their bodies. Outside chaos exploded as the men at the van drew weapons and the echoes of gunshots shattered the once peaceful afternoon. Part 1 reached its boiling point in an instant. The sharp crack of gunfire ricocheted through the air, and children screamed, clutching their seats as the bus jerked forward. Evelyn maneuvered the vehicle to create a makeshift barrier, giving Darnell vital seconds to seek cover behind the SUV. One of the attackers seemed caught off guard by the bus's sudden movement, firing aimlessly into the air. The other leveled a handgun at Darnell, who quickly ducked behind the front tire, returning fire with measured precision. Inside the bus, Mr. Hayes and Tara efficiently guided the children to lie flat on the aisle floor, shielding them from any stray bullets. Evelyn's thoughts whirled. She had to protect the kids, but she also couldn't leave Darnell out there alone. In a flash, she radioed a frantic message. "We have children on board. Engaging second gear to move them out of range. Cover me." Darnell's brief acknowledgement crackled back. From her vantage point, she could see one of the gunmen, limping, possibly hit by Darnell's return fire. The other was still active, darting around the side of the van for cover. Gritting her teeth, Evelyn eased the bus into a forward roll, heading for a safer stretch of road around the next bend. She had to balance speed with stability, mindful that the children were sprawled on the floor. The gunman took a pot shot and a window at the rear of the bus shattered, sending glass raining down. Panic surged. Evelyn had no choice but to press on, aware that every second she spent here heightened the risk. At last, they cleared the bend, and the gunfire seemed to fade. She brought the bus to a stop and yanked the emergency brake. Throwing open the door, she signaled to Mr. Hayes and Tara to keep the kids safe. Instinct and training propelled her forward. She grabbed her concealed sidearm, a compact pistol she kept holstered at her ankle, and sprinted back toward the firefight. Her boots pounded against the asphalt, and her breath came in sharp bursts. She'd hoped never to draw a weapon again, but the choice was gone. She had kids, friends, and an entire town to protect. As she approached the scene, she spotted Darnell exchanging fire from behind his SUV's engine block. One outlaw was already on the ground, while the other returned fire from the edge of the ditch. Evelyn dropped to a knee, steadying her aim. Her sniper training honed her focus, and in one controlled exhalation, she squeezed the trigger. The gunman cried out, clutching his arm, and collapsed. The echo of the shot lingered in the air, punctuated by the ragged breathing of those left standing. For a moment, everything was still. Then Darnell rose cautiously, eyes scanning for any other threats. Evelyn kept her weapon trained on the downed outlaw, her heart hammering in her chest. More sirens soon wailed in the distance, a sign that local law enforcement, slow as they were, was finally responding. While relief washed over her, she couldn't escape the realization. This was no random incident. The outlaws were escalating, and they'd just made a direct move against the bus. The battle for Maplewood's safety had officially begun, and it was far from over. The wail of approaching sirens grew louder, slicing through the lingering echoes of the gunfire. Evelyn lowered her sidearm, but kept it ready, scanning the immediate area in case more attackers lay hidden. Dust kicked up by the bus's sudden maneuver was still settling when two county patrol cars screeched onto the scene. Sheriff Dalton stepped out of his cruiser, hand on his holster, his eyes widening at the sight of two downed men near a ramshackle van. Darnell was crouched beside the SUV, still catching his breath, while Evelyn stood in the open weapon at her side, her face grimly set. "Are my kids all right?" she demanded, voice taut. Mr. Hayes and Tara waved from around the bend, indicating that the bus was parked safely away from the ambush site. Sheriff Dalton drew closer, his wary gaze flicking between Evelyn and the wounded outlaws. One of them clutched his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers, while the other groaned and rocked on his side, either from a leg wound or raw fear. "You want to tell me what happened here, Mrs. Hawkins?" the sheriff asked in a tone that suggested he already knew this was serious. He glanced uneasily at Evelyn's weapon, as if seeing her in a new light. Before she'd just been the polite, dependable bus driver. Now she looked every bit like the former Marine sniper she was. "We had no choice," Evelyn explained. Chest still heaving from the burst of adrenaline, she gestured toward the men on the ground. "They fired first. Darnell and I returned fire to protect the children. We have multiple witnesses." Sheriff Dalton knelt near one of the downed attackers, glaring at him. "You boys from that biker gang out by the old barn." The man stared back with defiance and spat onto the ground. Dalton's expression hardened. He signaled for the other deputies to disarm and secure the suspects. Once the threat was contained, paramedics arrived. The children, still huddled on the bus, were shaken but uninjured. Tara and Mr. Hayes did their best to maintain a calm front, though the little ones were teary-eyed and jittery. Some of the older kids asked questions in hushed voices. Trying to make sense of the chaos, Evelyn stepped on board, quickly surveying the shattered window at the back and the shards of glass glittering on the floor. She softened her tone, urging everyone to remain as calm as possible. Principal Carson, who'd been in a second car a short distance behind the bus, arrived moments later, face pale. He locked eyes with Evelyn, silently conveying gratitude and horror. She gave him a weary nod. The children's safety was paramount, but the day's events had clearly rattled everyone. As the crime scene took shape, law enforcement taping off the area, sirens fading into the distance, Evelyn felt an unsettling certainty settle in her gut. The Outlaws' plan had only just begun. The near ambush confirmed that these bikers intended to hurt innocent lives to get what they wanted. Whatever the ultimate goal, there was no longer any room for doubt. Maplewood was under siege, and Evelyn, Darnell, and Tara were standing on the front lines. Within half an hour, the roadside was a flurry of official activity. Deputies scoured the ditch for additional weapons or evidence, snapping photos of tire tracks and bullet casings. Sheriff Dalton, in a rare moment of decisiveness, seemed keen on gathering hard proof against the biker gang. Darnell provided a quick statement, explaining how he'd come upon the scene and identified the hostile men drawing guns. Meanwhile, Tara reassured the children, helping them onto a secondary bus the school had sent to pick them up. Evelyn lingered near her own vehicle, waiting to speak with the sheriff about next steps. The field trip had turned into a nightmare, and she wanted a guarantee that Maplewood's law enforcement would take real action this time. A rookie deputy approached her, notepad in hand. He stumbled over his words, clearly taken aback by the image of a school bus driver calmly packing a pistol. "Ma'am, can I get your statement?" And Evelyn recounted the sequence of events. She described the white van in the ditch, the men waving them down, and the split second when one brandished a firearm at Darnell. Throughout her account, the deputy scribbled hastily, his eyes occasionally darting up in disbelief. Evelyn finished by emphasizing that all her actions were in defense of the children. After the deputy left, Sheriff Dalton approached, arms folded across his chest. "You know you just turned this quiet county into a war zone, right?" he said, attempting levity but failing. His frown deepened as he surveyed the damage. "This is bigger than we realized, and it's clear those outlaws aren't just blowing smoke. They're organized." Evelyn met his gaze unflinchingly. "Sheriff, with all due respect, it's been bigger than we realized for weeks now. This gang has been scouting my bus route. They planned something with the kids as leverage. We have to act before they strike again." Dalton pressed his lips together, finally nodding. "I'll increase patrols around the school, ask for state trooper assistance, but we're understaffed and outgunned. We can't just storm their barn without a warrant or probable cause. That'll hold up in court." A tense silence followed. They both knew that legalities often lag behind imminent danger. "Then find that cause," Evelyn said simply, voice laced with determination. "We just had 2 men open fire on us. If that's not probable cause, I don't know what is." She turned toward the bus, running her fingers over the fresh bullet holes on its side. Each one felt like a personal attack on everything she tried to protect. The kids, now en route to the school under extra guard, would carry these memories home with them, a harsh lesson that their once peaceful town was no longer a safe haven. Meanwhile, the Outlaws, though thwarted, still had the advantage of knowing Maplewood's back roads and having multiple hideouts. Evelyn realized that if Dalton and his deputies weren't ready to escalate, she might have to take matters into her own hands again. Evelyn finally drove the bus, now patched with makeshift covers over broken windows, back to the school, flanked by 2 patrol cars. A subdued hush had fallen among the children, a stark contrast to their earlier excitement. Parents, already on edge after rumors of trouble, were in a near panic as they gathered at the school entrance. Principal Carson addressed them, ensuring everyone that no child had been harmed, but the sight of the bullet-ridden bus sent shockwaves through the crowd. As soon as Evelyn parked, she was enveloped by a wave of anxious mothers and fathers. They peppered her with questions. What happened? How did the shooting start? Were there kids? Okay, Despite her own jangled nerves, she tried to convey calm reassurance. Your children are safe now. She repeated, her voice gentle but firm. We did everything possible to protect them. Word spread quickly that Mrs. Hawkins had wielded a gun in defense of the children. Some parents expressed gratitude, while others reacted with disbelief, whispering to one another that their soft-spoken bus driver was apparently no ordinary civilian. Evelyn overheard one father mutter in awe, "They said she used to be military or something." That rumor gave her a strange pang. She'd never wanted her past to define her present, but circumstances had forced her hand. Amid the commotion, Mr. Hayes stepped up to assist. His broad shoulders and easy, empathetic manner provided a steadying influence. As a gym teacher, he was well-liked and trusted, so his calm words went a long way towards settling frayed nerves. Together, they managed to coax parents into an orderly dismissal, ensuring each child was reunited with their family. Still, the tension hanging over the parking lot was unmistakable. Maplewood had changed in a single afternoon. Evelyn slipped away to the faculty lounge where Darnell and Tara were waiting. Principal Carson, looking more weary than ever, thanked them for their heroics. We'll need an official report, he said, running a hand across his forehead. But more importantly, we need a plan to keep the kids safe. The sheriff says he's upping patrols, but I'm not sure it's enough. Tara, usually quiet, spoke up. This gang isn't going to back down. If anything, this incident will make them angrier. They lost 2 men to injuries or arrests, and if the rest are half as vicious, they'll see us as a threat to their operation. Darnell agreed. We've got to assume they'll retaliate. We need immediate concrete measures, secure the school perimeter, organize volunteers, maybe even set up a neighborhood watch. Carson exhaled. I'll do whatever's necessary, but I have limited resources. We're a small-town school. Standing off to the side, Evelyn listened, feeling a familiar stir of responsibility. She had walked away from the battlefield long ago, hoping to leave violence behind. But protecting innocent lives was too deeply ingrained in her. Her gaze flicked to the window where the sun was setting over Maplewood's rooftops. The afterglow painted the sky in warm colors, belying the danger lurking just beyond town limits. With a level voice, she said, "We can't wait for them to strike. We have to get ahead of this." Later that evening, the school board convened an emergency meeting. Word of the ambush had traveled fast, and concerned residents packed into the auditorium, voices buzzing with anxiety. Evelyn sat near the front with Tara and Darnell, silently observing the dynamics of her adopted hometown. It was clear that most of Maplewood's citizens had never faced a real threat like this. Their expressions ranged from anger to bewilderment. Principal Carson took the podium, outlining the events of the day. His voice wavered slightly when he described how a spike trap had blown the bus tire, forcing them into a confrontation. He thanked Evelyn, Darnell, and Tara for their bravery and assured everyone that the school was cooperating fully with law enforcement. Sheriff Dalton, looking uncharacteristically pale under the harsh overhead lights, stepped forward to speak next. We've apprehended 2 suspects believed to be part of the outlaw gang operating near the old barn, Dalton announced. He paused to let the murmurs subside. They're under guard at the county hospital and will be facing multiple charges. We have additional patrols monitoring the perimeter of the school and key roads in the county. We're also requesting state trooper support. Is that going to be enough? A middle-aged woman called from the back, her voice trembling. They tried to hurt our kids. A chorus of agreement echoed, and Dalton held up his hands. I understand your concerns. We're working around the clock. I can't share every detail of an ongoing investigation, but I promise we'll keep this community safe. Evelyn eyed him skeptically. Dalton's newfound resolve might be genuine, but she doubted the biker gang would be deterred by patrol cars alone. She stood up, raising a hand to speak. The crowd parted in hush, recognizing her as the bus driver who had reportedly fended off armed criminals. Sheriff, do we have any idea what they really want? She asked. Are they looking to extort the town, smuggle contraband, or is this about territory? Dalton hesitated. From what I've gathered, it could be related to a larger smuggling operation. Drugs, possibly. They might see Maplewood's remote roads as an ideal pipeline. Holding a bus full of kids hostage or threatening the school could have been a ploy to keep law enforcement off their trail. Evelyn's jaw tightened. She glanced at Tara and Darnell, who gave subtle nods of agreement. This aligned with their earlier suspicions. So if it's territory, Evelyn continued, we should assume they'll go even bigger now that we've pushed back. We need a plan that covers the school, the bus routes, and even private properties that are vulnerable. A rumble of fearful agreement coursed through the crowd. Town officials exchanged worried glances, clearly struggling to balance the need for thorough security with the reality of limited budgets and manpower. The tension in the air felt palpable, a collective sense that Maplewood stood on the brink of further violence. Principal Carson ended the meeting by forming a volunteer safety committee, which Evelyn Darnell and Tara joined. They left the school exhausted well after nightfall. As they stepped outside, a cool breeze ruffled Evelyn's hair, and she scanned the dark streets warily. Maplewood might still appear peaceful under the glow of its old-fashioned street lamps, but the innocence that once defined this place was slipping away. Piece by piece, Evelyn returned to her ranch-style home, the moonlight casting stark shadows across her driveway. Inside, she flipped on a single lamp, revealing the modest living room, where a few framed photos of her past Marine days sat on a shelf, moments that she seldom spoke about. Tonight, those memories seemed to beckon, reminding her of who she once was and what she was trained to do. In the small kitchen, she brewed a pot of coffee, despite the late hour. Sleep felt impossible with her mind churning over the day's events. She sipped the hot liquid, the warmth doing little to ease the knot in her chest. Her phone buzzed, revealing a text from Darnell. "Need to meet my place, 0900. She typed back a quick confirmation. Setting the phone aside, Evelyn wandered to a locked cabinet in the corner of her living room. Inside was her old sniper rifle, meticulously maintained, but rarely touched since she'd left the service. She ran her hand along the case, recalling the discipline and focus she'd once needed to operate such a weapon. The thought of returning to that mindset was sobering. She had moved to Maplewood for its tranquility, for a chance to heal and start anew. Yet life had a way of summoning old demons at the most unexpected times. Eventually, she forced herself to catch a few hours of rest. Her dreams were a turmoil of desert landscapes and echoing gunshots, a jumbled reflection of her deployment memories. She jerked awake at dawn, sweat beading her forehead, heart pounding. The morning sun piercing the bedroom curtains offered her little comfort. The day ahead promised no respite, only more strategizing to protect the town and its children. By the time she arrived at Darnell's rented cottage, Tara was already there, standing on the porch with a steaming mug of tea. She gave Evelyn a nod, her expression grim. "Morning, morning," Evelyn replied, stepping inside. Darnell had set up a makeshift command center in his living room. A folding table laden with county maps, a laptop open to a satellite view of Maplewood, and stacks of notes. He wore the same thoughtful frown he'd had the night before. "We've got intel from a source in the next county," he began. Not bothering with pleasantries, a farmer there reported strange activity on his land, motorcycles passing through at odd hours, as if scouting alternate routes. "Matches the description of the gang we're dealing with." Tara set down her mug. "So they're spreading out. This isn't just about Maplewood. It's about establishing a route across multiple counties, likely for smuggling." Evelyn nodded. "They want safe passage and no interference. Threatening the school was probably a warning for the town to stand down or face worse." Darnell rapped his knuckles on the table. "Then we need to coordinate with that farmer and see if he'll cooperate with law enforcement. But we also need a local plan, especially after yesterday's ambush. It's clear they'll target us again if they think we're in their way." Evelyn took a seat, studying the maps. "Then let's figure out where they're likely to strike next and prepare for it." Her voice was steady, but inside she felt a rising determination. The Outlaws had chosen her adopted home as their playground for terror. Now they would have to face the reality that Maplewood wasn't defenseless. And more importantly, they would have to contend with her, a woman whose past had trained her to confront danger head-on. Over the course of the morning, Evelyn, Darnell, and Tara hashed out a coordinated response plan. They broke it down into 3 tiers: in intelligence gathering, defensive measures, and direct intervention if necessary. Tara took the lead on intelligence, using her tech-savvy skills to sift through local social media, chatter, county databases, and any scrap of information that might hint at the bikers' movements. Darnell, with his private security background, organized a network of volunteers. Some were ex-military, others simply concerned citizens with firearms experience or a willingness to keep watch on vulnerable roads. Evelyn focused on defensive measures at the school. She worked closely with Principal Carson, discussing everything from emergency drills to security cameras. The sheriff's department, though still stretched thin, agreed to place a deputy at the school during peak hours. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Meanwhile, the children's families remained on high alert. A group of parents offered to take turns patrolling the perimeter of the school grounds. Though well-intentioned, their inexperience made Evelyn wary. One misstep could provoke a dangerous confrontation. Still, she couldn't dismiss their genuine desire to help. She organized a brief training session where Darnell taught basic safety protocols, including how to recognize suspicious behavior and when to call authorities. As the day wore on, Maplewood began to show signs of strain. The once friendly chatter in the diner now circled around rumors of shootouts and kidnappings. The local hardware store sold out of locks and security cameras within hours. People eyed strangers in town with suspicion, and the roads felt empty here as if residents preferred to stay home. This was precisely the environment the Outlaws wanted to create, a climate of fear they could exploit to move their illicit goods unnoticed. Late in the afternoon, Evelyn received a call from Sheriff Dalton. He sounded tired but determined. "We got word the gang is regrouping at the barn," he said. "My men saw increased motorcycle traffic heading that way, maybe 10 or 15 bikes total. Looks like they're calling reinforcements." Evelyn's pulse quickened. The barn was ground zero for the Outlaws' operations, but a direct raid could escalate matters if they had innocent hostages or booby traps inside. "What's your move?" she asked. Dalton hesitated. "We'd need a solid warrant, but with all that's happened, I might get one, especially after the gunfight on the highway. Problem is we can't outnumber them. If we corner them, there could be a firefight, and we don't want more civilians caught in the crossfire." A wave of frustration washed over Evelyn. The sheriff's caution was understandable, but time was working against them. Every hour the bikers spent at the barn gave them a chance to fortify their position or plan another attack. "We'll be ready," she finally said. "Just keep me updated." She hung up, feeling the weight of her choices. If the sheriff hesitated, would she and her ragtag team be forced to take more aggressive action? The thought of storming the barn, of facing the Outlaws on their own turf, made her skin prickle. But as the sun set on Maplewood, she knew that waiting around was no longer an option. With the lives of innocents at stake, Evelyn Hawkins prepared herself for the possibility that her peaceful days were truly over. When night fell, Evelyn found herself once again donning her dark jacket and boots, reminiscent of her clandestine scouting trips from the Marines. Darnell insisted on coming along, and together they drove to the outskirts of Maplewood, where the road turned from pavement to dirt. The plan was to covertly recon the barn and confirm the number of bikers present. Tara stayed behind, coordinating from Darnell's makeshift command center, ready to relay any crucial developments to the volunteer watchers or the sheriff. The moon was half full, casting pale light across rows of cornfields. Evelyn parked the pickup truck in a small grove of trees about a mile from the barn. The duo approached quietly, using the tall stalks and the natural dip of the land for cover. Adrenaline coursed through Evelyn, every sense sharpening the way it had on her old missions. She could feel her heart beating against her ribcage, but her breathing remained controlled. Next to her, Darnell moved with similar discipline, his posture low and deliberate. Soon the barn's silhouette loomed ahead, a hulking structure with rusted metal siding and broken windows. Dim yellow lights flickered inside. The low growl of motorcycle engines occasionally pierced the stillness, suggesting ongoing comings and goings. Evelyn raised a pair of binoculars, scanning the perimeter. 4 bikes were parked outside, though the earlier report suggested there could be many more hidden around back or inside. A couple of gang members stood near a makeshift barrel fire, their conversation masked by the distance, but their body language indicated heightened alertness. They circled around to gain a better vantage point. Through a gap in the barn's siding, Evelyn glimpsed multiple figures, possibly a dozen or more, huddled around a long table. It looked like some kind of meeting, with one man at the head gesturing emphatically. She nudged Darnell and offered him the binoculars. He took a long look, then lowered them. Brow furrowed. "Looks organized," he whispered. "Not just a ragtag bunch of thieves, they've got hierarchy structure." Evelyn nodded, recalling her previous glimpse of them studying maps. "They're planning something bigger. Another run, maybe. Or planning to strike back at us for interfering." They crouched there for nearly an hour, observing patterns. Men occasionally walked outside for a smoke, then went back in. Now and then headlights would cut through the darkness, and another biker would pull up, greeted with ahs or brief handshakes before disappearing inside. The Outlaws seemed to be converging, preparing for a decisive move. Finally deciding they had gathered enough intel, Evelyn motioned for Darnell to follow her back to the truck. As they slipped through the fields, they kept their footsteps light, conscious that one rustle could betray their presence. Only once they were back on the main road with the barn's lights, a distant glow, did Evelyn exhale the breath she'd been holding. They drove in silence for a while, each lost in thought. When they reached the outskirts of Maplewood, Darnell turned to her. "We can't wait for them to come to us," he said quietly. Evelyn nodded, her gaze fixed ahead, jaw set. The time for passive defense was over. If Maplewood was to be saved from a violent showdown, They might need to meet the outlaws head-on on their own terms. Back at Darnell's cottage, Tara had collated fresh reports. Residents near the barn heard engines revving late into the night, and suspicious vehicles were spotted along back roads leading into neighboring counties. Sitting around the cramped kitchen table, the trio hashed out what they had seen at the barn. "They're definitely gearing up," Tara concluded, tapping her laptop screen, where a map highlighted various farm roads and cross-county routes. I picked up chatter on local frequencies. Some talk of a big transport going down in the next couple of days. They might be trying to run a large shipment of drugs or weapons through Maplewood. Evelyn leaned closer, and if we try to stop them, they might use force or hostages, including the kids. She grimaced, recalling the near disaster on the highway. The outlaws had already shown willingness to harm innocents. Darnell's jaw clenched. "We need to cut them off at the source, or at least disrupt their operation enough to scare them off." Silence fell as each weighed the implications. Officially, they should let law enforcement handle this, but the sheriff's resources were limited, and even with warrants and state troopers, an outright raid on an armed gang could cost lives. Maplewood's children and families were in immediate danger, and time was ticking. At last, Evelyn spoke, her voice measured. "If we can gather clear evidence, like photos of their stash, or them loading illicit goods, it might be enough for a full-scale bust. The sheriff could justify bringing in SWAT or federal agents, but we have to be sure we're not waltzing into a death trap ourselves," Tara nodded. "I'll keep an eye on their communications. Some of these biker gangs use CB radios or unencrypted channels. Maybe we'll catch wind of the exact timing of their next move. Then we can pounce with the authorities on standby." They agreed on a risky plan. Tara would monitor digital chatter while Evelyn and Darnell set up a hidden stakeout near the barn. Once the bikers moved contraband, they'd document it, photo or video proof. Simultaneously, they'd alert Dalton and, if needed, call in state reinforcements. It was a delicate dance, catch them red-handed, but avoid a shootout if possible. Before they parted ways, Evelyn laid a hand onto Darnell's shoulder. "I appreciate what you're doing, but let's remember our priority is the kids' safety, not playing hero. If it gets too hot, we back off and let the professionals handle it." Darnell smiled ruefully. "Sometimes I forget we're civilians now." Tara squeezed both their arms, an unspoken show of solidarity. "We're in this together." Maplewood's our home too, at least for the moment. Outside, the wind picked up rustling tree branches under the glow of a single street lamp. Evelyn looked up at the sky, half expecting to see storm clouds gathering, a reflection of the turmoil roiling within her. This was no longer just an isolated threat. It was a full-blown war for control of their quiet county, and she feared that before it was over, Maplewood would be changed forever. The next evening, Evelyn found herself pulling into a secluded vantage point, far enough from the barn to avoid detection, yet close enough for a clear line of sight. The farmland stretched on either side, rows of corn swaying under a gentle breeze. She had chosen an old hunting blind perched on a slight rise, an elevated spot that overlooked a stretch of dirt road leading to the barn's back entrance. It was dusk, with the sky melting into orange and purple hues. She parked her pickup a half-mile away and trekked the rest on foot, carrying a small pack with binoculars, a long-lens camera, and emergency supplies. Her old sniper instincts flared back to life, checking wind direction, scanning the terrain for potential cover, and memorizing distances. She had resisted the urge to bring her rifle. This was a recon mission, not a raid. Meanwhile, Tara was back at Darnell's cottage, monitoring radio frequencies and social media for any chatter. Darnell was stationed in his SUV a short distance from Evelyn, maintaining radio contact. The plan was to observe, document, and call in the cavalry if the bikers made a major move. As twilight deepened, the barn's lights blinked on. Through her binoculars, Evelyn watched silhouettes pace in and out of the main door. She caught flashes of movement, possibly crates being loaded onto trucks. Heart pounding, she began snapping pictures with the camera, zooming in whenever the barn door opened wide. The clarity wasn't perfect in the low light, but it might be enough to show suspicious cargo. An hour passed, then two. The noises from the barn ebbed and flowed, engines revving, doors slamming, muffled voices. Evelyn kept her posture steady despite the cramped quarters of the hunting blind. She was used to waiting for long stretches, thanks to her military background, but the stakes felt higher now. She wasn't overseas on a sanctioned operation. She was in her hometown, trying to outmaneuver criminals who had already threatened children's lives. Suddenly, the radio at her hip crackled. Tara's voice came through, hushed but urgent. "Got chatter on a CB frequency. Sounds like they're planning to move the package soon. Could be tonight." Evelyn stiffened, adrenaline surging. "Copy that," she whispered. "Any mention of location or timing?" A brief pause crackled with static. "They said they'll head west to the old service road once everything's loaded. Not sure when, but it sounds imminent." West of the barn lay a disused service road that looped around the county, merging with a larger highway. It was a perfect route for smuggling, remote, poorly lit, and rarely patrolled. Evelyn raised her camera again, scanning the barn's perimeter. A large box truck had just rumbled into view, and several bikers were guiding it into position. If she could catch them loading contraband, that would be the breakthrough evidence Sheriff Dalton needed. She pressed the shutter repeatedly, heart thumping each time the flash of the truck's headlights revealed men hoisting large black bags. Tara's voice hissed again. "One more thing. Heard them mention needing a distraction. Maybe they're planning to draw the cops' attention elsewhere while they move the goods." Evelyn clenched her jaw. A distraction could easily mean targeting the school again. Or worse, she toggled her radio to alert Darnell. They might make a move on another front. "Be ready," taking a steadying breath. She refocused on capturing every incriminating detail. Tonight could be the turning point for better or worse. A tense half-hour crawled by as Evelyn kept her camera trained on the barn. The box truck was now half-filled, judging by the lowered suspension under the weight of its cargo. Just as she repositioned for a clearer shot, her radio crackled once more. This time, it was Darnell. "Evelyn. Heads up, I see movement on the south side. A couple of bikes heading toward the road you're on. They might be doing perimeter checks." Evelyn's heart kicked into high gear. She ducked lower in the blind, triple-checking that she was fully concealed. Sure enough, the faint rumble of engines grew louder. Two bikers emerged from the barn area, creeping along a dirt path that curved around the fields. She raised her binoculars just enough to see one rider scanning with a flashlight, breathing shallowly. Evelyn recalled the countless times she'd lain hidden during reconnaissance missions abroad. Patience and stillness were her allies now. A single misstep, like the snap of a twig or the gleam of reflected light, could give her away. She winced inwardly, wishing she'd parked the truck even farther back. As the bikers drew closer, the flashlight's beams swept across the ground, pausing briefly near the hunting blind. Evelyn held her breath, her body tense. The beam hovered for a couple of agonizing seconds before moving on. Eventually, the men continued down the path, apparently satisfied that no one was lurking in the darkness. Exhaling in relief, Evelyn waited until their engine noise faded. She carefully resumed her vigil, snapping more photos of the box truck loading. The last thing she wanted was to break cover prematurely. They were so close to getting the evidence they needed. Meanwhile, Tara reported a new burst of radio chatter. "They're calling more riders to escort the truck," she informed Evelyn and Darnell. "This must be a major shipment." Evelyn toggled her mic. "Tara, see if you can get the sheriff on the line. We need him to intercept this truck once it hits the main roads." Darnell interjected. "I'll follow them at a distance once they leave. You stay put until they're clear. No sense risking a confrontation unless we have backup." Evelyn agreed. "I'll hold position as long as I can, but if they realize I'm here, I might have to slip out fast." In the distance, the barn door slammed shut and more figures gathered around the truck. Evelyn zoomed in with her camera, capturing one outlaw carrying what looked like an assault rifle, likely for protection during transport. She swallowed hard. This was no small operation. If the sheriff decided to take them on, he'd better bring more than his usual deputies. Every nerve felt taut as the box truck's engine roared to life. Men on motorcycles lined up around it, forming a convoy. Through the lens, she could see the smug confidence in their posture. They believed themselves unstoppable. Evelyn allowed herself a grim smile. For the first time, these outlaws were about to face consequences. But deep down, she worried about the distraction they'd mentioned. If they had something vicious planned to draw police away, Maplewood School or its people could be at immediate risk. Evelyn watched as the convoy rumbled out of the barnyard and onto the dirt track leading away from the property. The box truck took the lead, flanked by half a dozen motorcycles. Another half-dozen bikers remained behind, presumably to guard the barn or continue their operations. She snapped a few final photos, then carefully dismantled her camera setup, storing everything in her pack. Darnell's voice crackled in her earpiece. "They're heading west, just like Tara's intel suggested. I'm going to tail them, but keep some distance." Evelyn nodded to herself, even though he couldn't see her. "Understood. I'll wait a bit before pulling out to avoid tipping them off." In the background, she could hear the soft buzzing of Tara's voice, presumably relaying updates from the sheriff. Evelyn felt a wave of relief that law enforcement might be mobilizing. Still, she couldn't shake the dread that something else was brewing. The Outlaws had specifically talked about needing a distraction. Had they set traps on the roads? Or worse, were they planning to strike somewhere else in Maplewood while the authorities chased the convoy? Climbing down from the hunting blind, she moved with care, scanning the area for any lingering scouts. After a few minutes of quiet, she judged it safe to exit. The walk back to her pickup truck felt interminably long under the starlit sky. Every rustle of wind or snap of a twig made her heart lurch. She fought the urge to run. Stealth was paramount. At last she reached the truck. Easing behind the wheel, she started the engine with headlights off, navigating by moonlight until she reached a safer stretch of road. Only then did she flick on the lights and accelerate a knot of tension, loosening slightly in her chest. She radioed Darnell for a status check. "I've got eyes on the convoy," he reported. "They're about 2 miles ahead on the old service road. Sheriff's men are setting up a potential roadblock near the county line." A glimmer of hope sparked in Evelyn. Maybe they'd actually catch these criminals in the act. She pressed the gas pedal, heading in Darnell's direction. A sudden burst of static interrupted her optimism. Tara's voice came through, urgent Evelyn. "The sheriff just got a call. Possible shots fired near Maplewood High School. They're pulling some units back." "I think that's the distraction." Evelyn's stomach lurched. Shots fired at the school. At this hour, though it was well past typical school hours, the building often hosted evening activities or staff working late. Her mind flew to Principal Carson, teachers like Mrs. Salinas, and even the janitor, Mr. Cole. "I'm redirecting there," she said firmly. She veered onto a connecting road that would take her back toward town. "Darnell, be careful," she added. "If they're pulling units, you might be the only one tailing that convoy." "Got it," Darnell replied, voice grim. "Take care of the school. Let me know if you need backup." Evelyn's thoughts churned. The Outlaws had chosen their targets strategically, pulling law enforcement in opposite directions. She gripped the steering wheel, pushing the truck as fast as she dared. If the bikers were brazen enough to stage a violent diversion at the school, things were escalating to a frightening new level. And if that was the case, they'd soon learn what it meant to corner a Marine sniper determined to protect her community. Road back into Maplewood was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to Evelyn's racing thoughts. She flicked on her high beams and floored the gas pedal. In the darkness ahead, she could see the faint glow of streetlights near the school complex. She prayed that the sheriff's units had arrived in time to stop whatever was happening. Arriving at the school parking lot, she found chaos. The flashing lights of 2 patrol cars illuminated the area, and half a dozen officers were taking cover behind their vehicles. Weapons drawn. Across the lot, the front entrance doors were shattered, a spiderweb of cracked glass reflecting red and blue strobes. The muffled echo of gunfire sent her diving behind her pickup for cover. Her radio crackled. Tara's voice. "Evelyn, are you okay? We heard more shots." "The sheriff's on scene, but it's unclear who's firing." Peering over the hood, Evelyn spotted a pair of figures darting down the main corridor, visible through the ruined entrance doors. She couldn't confirm if they were outlaws or someone else. "I'm on site," she hissed into the mic. 2 suspects inside, possibly armed. Inching forward, she signaled one of the deputies crouched near the cruisers. He recognized her from the recent ambush and allowed her to approach. The deputy was pale but steady. "They crashed in here a few minutes ago, fired shots, demanded the building's security footage. They were trying to destroy recordings of something." Guess Evelyn's jaw clenched. The Outlaws must have wanted to erase any camera evidence of their comings and goings near the school. Possibly they feared a link between the bus ambush and their presence around town. "Any hostages?" she asked. "We don't think so," the deputy replied. "Most staff left hours ago. But we can't be certain. We heard them shouting. They seemed agitated, maybe looking for something else." Her mind raced. Could they be searching for Principal Carson or some other records? "Cover me," she said. Before the deputy could protest, Evelyn slid inside the front entrance, shards of glass crunching under her boots. She felt the old battle instincts kick in. Heart-pounding breaths coming slow and measured, every sense on high alert. The hallway smelled of burnt gunpowder and stale coffee from the teacher's lounge. Lockers lined the walls, graffiti from bored students scrawled across some of them. She followed the echo of muffled footsteps deeper into the building, stepping lightly to avoid making noise. Another gunshot rang out, reverberating through the corridors. Evelyn flattened herself against a row of lockers, inching toward the corner. Her radio buzzed softly in her ear. Tara's voice. "Any sign of them?" Evelyn pressed a button on her earpiece. "Not yet," she whispered. "Going dark for a bit. Keep me posted on Darnell's end." She clicked off, focusing solely on the situation at hand. Peeking around the corner, she spotted one of the intruders down the hall, scanning doorways with a handgun. Adrenaline surged, but she kept her composure. She had to wait for the right moment. Rushing in could cost innocent lives if any staffers were still inside. These men were dangerous enough to shoot first and ask questions later. Evelyn gripped her sidearm tighter, her resolve solidifying. The outlaws had made another grave mistake by setting foot in her domain, and she intended to make sure they didn't leave it unscathed. Sliding along the lockers, Evelyn took careful, measured steps. Her Marine training told her to keep low and use the available cover. Glancing into each classroom, she confirmed they were empty. No terrified teachers or janitors huddling under desks. Good. The fewer civilians caught in this crossfire, the better. She edged closer to the intruder, a tall figure in biker leathers with his back partially turned. A second outlaw emerged from a side hallway, glancing nervously behind him. He clutched a shotgun, the muzzle sweeping across the floor as he muttered curses under his breath. Evelyn realized they were heading toward the school's security office where the main server stored footage from campus cameras. If they managed to wipe everything crucial, evidence linking them to the recent crimes might vanish. She inhaled slowly, calming her nerves. This had to end now. With methodical precision, she rolled around the corner, aiming at the second outlaw. First, drop it, she shouted, voice echoing off the tiled walls. He spun, eyes widening at the sight of a woman pointing a pistol at him. For a second, he froze, just enough time for Evelyn to squeeze the trigger. A single shot grazed his shoulder, sending him sprawling into a row of lockers with a yelp. His shotgun clattered to the floor. The tall intruder with the handgun whirled around, returning fire. Bullets whizzed past Evelyn, smashing fluorescent lights overhead and showering sparks down the hallway. She dove behind a doorway, hard hammering. Her earpiece crackled, but she ignored it, every instinct focused on survival. "Stay down," she yelled, hoping to keep the men pinned. A volley of shots rattled the lockers, metal ricochets filling the air. The wounded man was groaning, likely incapacitated, but the tall one was still active, unleashed in his fury. He cursed at her, voice echoing with desperation. Evelyn took a moment to reload, her hands steady despite the adrenaline surge. Her mind flashed back to the harrowing engagements overseas, how she taught herself to compartmentalize fear and remain coldly efficient. She peeked around the corner and fired twice, forcing him to duck back behind a water fountain. A sudden lull in the gunfire told her he might be reloading or repositioning. She used the brief pause to advance. Charging down the hallway, she kept low, sidestepping broken glass and debris. The tall outlaw re-emerged, firing wildly. Evelyn dropped to a knee, took aim, and squeezed off 2 more rounds. One struck him in the leg, toppling him to the floor with a cry. His pistol skittered out of reach. Breathing hard, Evelyn approached cautiously, weapon trained on the man. Blood seeped through his jeans, and he glared at her with unbridled hatred. You don't know who you're messing with," he snarled, clutching his wounded leg. Evelyn's gaze was ice cold, her voice steady. "Actually, I do." Behind her, sheriff's deputies flooded the hallway. Guns raised. They quickly secured the scene, cuffing the wounded men. Evelyn lowered her weapon, relief washing over her. Another crisis averted, but at what cost? As paramedics bustled in to treat the injured outlaws, she felt no triumph, only a sober understanding that the war for Maplewood was far from over. Their enemies were bigger and more organized than ever, and Darnell was still out there tailing the main convoy. Gritting her teeth, Evelyn braced for whatever retaliation would come next. The neon hum of hospital lights and the faint beeping of medical monitors marked a stark contrast to the gunpowder-laced chaos that had erupted at Maplewood High School only an hour prior. In the corridor just outside the emergency ward, Evelyn paced back and forth, arms crossed over her chest. Sheriff Dalton had ordered that the 2 injured outlaws be treated and kept under guard. Though she knew it was standard procedure, every fiber of her being rebelled at the thought of these men receiving care while the town still lay vulnerable to the rest of their gang. Her phone buzzed. She snatched it up, half expecting an update from Darnell. Instead, Tara's worried voice crackled through. "Any news on the suspects?" Evelyn glanced around. A deputy stood nearby, rifle at the ready, guarding the closed door to one of the outlaws' rooms. "They're in surgery," she said quietly. "Nothing life-threatening. They'll be in cuffs as soon as they're stable." A tense silence filled the line. Finally, Tara spoke again. "I tried reaching Darnell. No response. He texted me once, said he was tailing the convoy, but then radio silence." Evelyn's pulse ticked up. "Could be a dead spot in coverage," she replied, trying to inject optimism she didn't fully feel. "Or maybe he's keeping comms quiet to avoid detection. I hope that's all it is." Tara paused. "Look, the sheriff's men are stretched thin after the shooting at the school. Half of them are here, the other half scattered around town. I'm worried the outlaws might exploit this." Evelyn leaned against the wall. exhaustion pulling at her. She'd been running on adrenaline for days, each crisis blending into the next. We can't let our guard down. I'll head out as soon as I'm sure the hospital is secure. Stay on those channels and keep me posted. She hung up, eyes drifting to the overhead TV in the waiting room, which was tuned to a local news station. The headline scrolling across the bottom read, "Another shooting in Maplewood. Local school. Targeted." The anchor's voice, somber and tense, recapped the basic facts. Unknown intruders, a brief gunfight, minimal injuries, thanks to an armed citizen and law enforcement. Evelyn shut her eyes, recalling the shock in the principal's face when he'd arrived at the scene minutes too late. The entire community was on edge, many hearing gunshots for the first time in their peaceful little town. Taking a fortifying breath, she turned to the deputy. "Listen, I have to go. Do you have enough manpower here?" He nodded. "We'll manage. The sheriff left a couple of us specifically to guard these perps. Plus, hospital security is cooperating." Evelyn gave him a tight-lipped smile, and unspoken appreciation passing between them. They were both tired, both aware that things could get worse before they got better. "Radio me if there's any trouble." Moments later, she stepped out into the hospital parking lot. The air felt colder now, a faint wind rustling the trees. Her watch read just after midnight, the same time when a thick hush usually wrapped Maplewood in safety. Not tonight. The tension was like a static charge in the air, humming and dangerous. Sliding into her truck, Evelyn felt a single-minded determination to find Darnell. The Outlaws' big transport was in motion, and if he was alone out there, he might be walking straight into a nest of vipers. Her headlights cut through the dark streets as she pulled away, mind churning with possibilities. Another confrontation was almost inevitable. The only question was whether Maplewood could withstand it. With the hospital receding in the rearview mirror, Evelyn navigated the quiet roads leading out of town. The moon, still high in the sky, illuminated sprawling farmland dotted with the occasional distant porch light. She flipped to the channel Darnell typically used, pressing the radio to her lips. "Darnell, this is Evelyn. Come in." Static greeted her, a faint hiss of emptiness. She tried again, scanning alternate frequencies, but found nothing. She mentally retraced the route the convoy would have taken, the old service road running west, eventually hooking up with Highway 78 near the county line. If they planned to bypass Maplewood entirely, they might veer onto gravel roads that snaked through remote fields and patches of forest. She remembered how Darnell had said the sheriff planned a roadblock near the county border. Had the outlaws circumvented it? Or had they run into something worse? Despite the chill night air, Evelyn felt sweat beat along her temples. Her mind swirled with scenarios. Darnell pinned down by enemy fire, or forced off the road, or captured. She drove faster, the truck's tires skidding on loose gravel as she took a sharp turn. The thought of losing him, a comrade and friend who'd risked his life to protect this town, spurred her onward. After another mile of winding roads, her headlights illuminated a sign for the service road. She slowed, scanning the ground for fresh tire tracks. Indeed, multiple vehicles had passed recently. The ruts and scattered gravel told the story. Shifting into low gear, she crept along the edge, searching for any sign of Darnell's SUV or possible trouble. A sudden glint in the ditch caught her attention. Parking on the shoulder, she hopped out, breath visible in the cool night air. She followed the glint to discover shattered fragments of glass from a headlight. Her heart sank. She lifted her flashlight, illuminating a narrow skid mark leading down into the ditch and back up again. It looked like a vehicle had careened off the road but recovered. Her hand twitched toward her sidearm. If there'd been a struggle or an attempted ambush, she might still be in danger. She moved carefully, shining her light on patches of grass and searching for more clues. Then she found a partial shoe print in the mud, possibly from a heavy boot. It pointed toward a cluster of trees bordering the road. Evelyn's pulse hammered. She toggled her radio. "Tara, I found signs of an incident on the service road. Broken headlight, glass skid marks, footprints, possibly Darnell's route. Any word on him?" A pause, then Tara's voice laced with anxiety. "Nothing, hold on." Static followed, and Evelyn waited, every second ticking by like an eternity. At last, Tara came back. "The sheriff says the roadblock never saw the convoy. They suspect the outlaws took a detour. One more thing. Local farm cameras caught the tail of an SUV driving off-road about 20 minutes ago. Could be Darnell trying to stay hidden." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I'll keep searching. If the convoy slipped the roadblock, they might be meeting with more buyers or crossing state lines." She paused, scanning the darkness. Or they might be hunkering down somewhere else for a final stand. She climbed back into her truck, mindset on covering every lead. No matter how dire the situation, she refused to abandon Darnell to face this alone. The outlaws had threatened her children on the bus, attacked the school, and now threatened a friend. They were turning Maplewood into a battleground, and she was done playing defense. About a mile further down the service road, the ground turned from gravel to packed dirt, riddled with potholes. Trees leaned in from either side, creating a gloomy tunnel effect beneath the moonlit sky. Evelyn slowed her truck, carefully maneuvering to avoid a blowout. She flipped her high beams on, illuminating the twisted branches overhead. Every so often, she heard the distant roar of motorcycles echo through the trees, hard to pinpoint, but unmistakable. The outlaws were out of here, and they weren't subtle about it. Yet where was Darnell in all this? Had he gone deeper into the woods or tried to cut them off on another path? Just as she rounded a bend, her headlights revealed a sign tacked to a wooden post. Bridge Out Road closed. Beyond it, the path narrowed into a single lane that disappeared into darkness. She braked, scanning the sign. It looked weathered, not a fresh addition. If the outlaws were using this route, maybe there was a makeshift crossing or a secondary trail. She left the engine idling and hopped out again to check for tracks. A set of tire impressions led right past the road closed sign. With her flashlight, she followed them, pushing through a row of overgrown shrubs until she emerged onto a small clearing. Beyond that, a decrepit wooden bridge spanned a slow-moving creek. It looked unstable at best, the planks uneven, some missing altogether. Yet fresh marks in the dirt showed that at least one heavy vehicle had crossed here recently. She toggled the radio again. Tara, I'm near the old creek crossing at the South Fork. Found tracks, looks like a truck, and several bikes crossed a wooden bridge. Any satellite coverage? Tara's exasperated sigh came through cloud cover as messing up the live feed. But let me see if I can get an older overhead view. Maybe there's a known trail on the other side. Evelyn waited, tapping her fingers against the flashlight. In the silence, she heard a low rumble of engines, this time closer. She clicked off her flashlight and stepped deeper into the shadows. A moment later, she spotted a pair of headlights bouncing down the trail toward the rickety bridge. Two motorcycles riding side by side slowed as they approached the crossing, heart pounding. Evelyn crouched behind a fallen log. The bikers stopped to examine the bridge, shining a spotlight on the planks. She heard one shout to the other, though the words were lost in the roar of their idling engines. After a brief exchange, they revved up and gingerly guided their bikes onto the bridge boards, creaking ominously beneath the weight. Evelyn held her breath. If she gave herself away now, 2 against 1 in near total darkness would be a lethal disadvantage, especially if they had reinforcements nearby. Once the bikes reached the far side, their red taillights disappeared into the dense forest. Evelyn exhaled, heart thrumming. The outlaws were definitely using this crossing. If Darnell had followed them, he might be on the other side, possibly in over his head. She raised the radio again, whispering, "Tara, I'm crossing the old bridge headed south. No sign of Darnell yet." "You're going alone." Tara's voice spiked with concern. "Wait for backup." Evelyn swallowed. "We don't have time." If they've got him pinned, every second counts. She moved back to her truck, resolved to edge it across the bridge despite the risk. If she destroyed it by crossing, so be it. She wasn't leaving until she found Darnell, or she had confirmation he was safe. Throwing one last glance at the starlit sky, she climbed into the driver's seat and nudged the truck forward, the wooden planks groaning in protest with every inch. The rickety bridge swayed beneath the weight of Evelyn's truck, each plank protesting with loud creaks. She gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, inching forward at a crawl. Her headlights revealed thick cobwebs and patches of moss clinging to the wooden beams, evidence that nobody had bothered to maintain this crossing in years. But the fresh tire tracks told a different story. The outlaws had found and repurposed this forgotten path for their smuggling route. When she finally reached the far side, the tires crunched onto solid ground. She exhaled, tension seeping from her shoulders as she left the precarious bridge behind. Dense forest enveloped the narrow path ahead, branches scraping the sides of her truck. She proceeded slowly, peering through the windshield for any sign of other vehicles. The trail wound deeper, eventually widening into a small clearing. Moonlight filtered through breaks in the canopy, illuminating a battered old sign pointing south toward another county. A faint glow caught her eye, a flicker of light somewhere to the left. Heart quickening, she veered off the main path, following what looked like freshly trampled grass. The glow brightened with each turn until she came upon a secluded campsite near the creek's edge. She killed the engine and doused her headlights, proceeding on foot. Carefully, she parted a line of overgrown bushes to see what lay beyond. It was a makeshift gathering spot, a couple of tents, a dying campfire, and a lone motorcycle propped against a tree. Tension seized her. There was no sign of people, but gear was scattered around, indicating whoever was here hadn't gone far. Could Darnell be close? She took one step forward, then froze at a sudden rustling behind her. In a flash, she had her sidearm drawn, pivoting just in time to see a shadow lunging from behind a trunk. The figure tackled her to the ground with surprising force. Evelyn's back slammed into the soil and she narrowly avoided losing her weapon. She managed to twist free, kicking her assailant in the midsection. They both scrambled upright. The moonlight revealed a bearded biker in a leather vest, eyes wild with adrenaline. He charged again. Evelyn ducked, letting his momentum carry him into a clump of thorny bushes. As he roared in pain and fury, she brought her pistol up. "Don't move!" she shouted. Breath heaving, the man sneered but froze in place, hands instinctively shielding his face from thorns. Slowly he lifted them in surrender. "Who else is here?" she demanded. He spat onto the ground, refusing to answer. She advanced carefully, gun leveled. "Where is my friend?" "A man in an SUV. You seen him." A flicker of recognition flashed in the biker's eyes. "You mean the one who tried to follow us? He's about to meet the boss real soon. You're too late." A twisted grin spread across his face, smeared with dirt. Fear ignited inside Evelyn, but she pushed it down, focusing on control. Where did they take him? The biker only laughed. "Ask him yourself if you can make it there alive." Evelyn's grip on the pistol tightened. This was no time for half measures. "Then show me." She motioned with the barrel for him to move toward the campsite. With luck, he might inadvertently reveal something useful. She had no intention of letting him walk free, but if he led her to Darnell, it could be worth the risk. In the distance, the forest glowed faintly under the moon, and the thought of an outnumbered Darnell steeling himself for a final confrontation tore at her resolve. She needed to act, and quickly. At gunpoint, Evelyn forced the bearded biker to sit near the dimming campfire, where she could keep an eye on him. She kept her stance, balanced sidearm trained on the man's chest. His sneer had faded, replaced by guarded caution. She sensed he was sizing her up, looking for any moment of weakness. "Answer my questions," she demanded, voice low and steady, "and maybe you'll live to see the sunrise." He barked a short laugh, wincing as he shifted his weight in the thorn-scraped bushes. "You don't look like a killer." Evelyn's gaze hardened. Looks can be deceiving. "Where is my friend, and where's your boss?" The biker's eyes flicked to her weapon, then back to her face. "They nabbed your buddy. He's alive for now. They were hauling him deeper south, some hideout near an old logging road." "That's all I know," Evelyn pressed. "This hideout? How far from here?" He shrugged, wincing again. 10 miles, maybe 15. "The boss keeps it hush-hush. Only a few of us know about it. They plan to use it as a fallback if things go south in Maplewood." A twinge of hope sparked within her. At least Darnell was alive, according to this man. But for how long? What's the route? "No main roads. They'll take the creek trail until they hit Deerfield Fork, then loop around an abandoned ranger station. The place is built like a fortress." Evelyn studied him for a moment. His chest rose and fell with tense breaths. She could practically see the wheels turning in his head, plotting either escape or retaliation. Her gut told her he'd feed her half-truths if he thought it might keep him breathing longer. "You're coming with me," she said abruptly. "Lead the way." She tossed a length of zip tie at him, her pistol never wavering. "Cuff your feet. If you try anything, I won't hesitate." He stared incredulously. "How am I supposed to walk with my feet cuffed?" "You'll shuffle," she replied coldly. "Faster than that, and I might shoot you in the leg." Glaring, he complied, fumbling with the plastic tie. Once she was sure he was secure, she hauled him to his feet and nudged him toward the single motorcycle resting against a tree. Before he could protest, she swiped the key from his vest pocket and pulled the bike upright. "We'll tow you in the back of my truck," she said, "just in case your story is legit." The man snorted but said nothing, a simmering anger in his eyes. In the distance, a lone owl hooted, oblivious to the mortal standoff. Evelyn took a precious second to radio Tara. "I have a lead on Darnell, possibly taken to a hideout near Deerfield Fork. We're heading that way now." Tara's urgent reply crackled through Evelyn. "It's past 2 a.m. I can't reach the sheriff or any deputies. They're spread thin, and some are responding to other 911 calls." "Please be careful, understood," Evelyn whispered, scanning the darkened woods. "If you can get anyone at all to help direct them my way." She ended the call and prodded the biker forward. The forest rustled around them like a living thing, and a surge of raw determination coursed through her veins. She was gambling everything on this man's directions. If the outlaws had Darnell and were planning to move him, Or worse, time was their biggest enemy. She would do whatever it took to find her friend, even if it meant descending into the Outlaws' stronghold alone. Evelyn wrestled the bulky motorcycle onto a makeshift ramp in the back of her pickup, the captured biker watching with a mix of bitterness and grudging respect. The zip tie around his ankles made his movements clumsy, but she had no illusions. If he got a chance, he might still try to overpower her. Once the bike was secured, she shoved him into the passenger seat of the truck, tethering his zip tie to the metal frame beneath. "Don't do anything stupid," she warned. He merely glowered in silence. She fired up the engine and flicked on the headlights. Maneuvering through the tight clearings, the wheels bumped over tree roots and ruts, jostling them both. As they headed deeper south, the night felt increasingly oppressive, the shadows beneath the canopy stretching like long fingers. Her high beams sometimes caught the flash of an animal's eyes among the undergrowth, but otherwise the forest was eerily still. The biker stared out the window, jaw set. Occasionally, Evelyn noticed his gaze flick toward her sidearm. She kept it within easy reach, angled so he'd have to lunge across her to grab at a risk, but she was prepared. The tension between them felt like a coiled spring ready to snap at any mistake. After several minutes, they reached a narrow dirt road that branched off from the main trail. The biker suddenly spoke, voice raspy. "Deerfield? Fork is down that way. Takes you to the old logging camp, but watch out, there might be scouts." Evelyn slowed the truck to a crawl. "Why are you helping me now? Figure we'll both get shot if they see us together." A bitter chuckle escaped him. "You think the boss cares if he plugs me by mistake? He already sees me as expendable. At least this way, I keep breathing a bit longer." She eyed him sidelong. "Keep cooperating and you might get out of this in one piece." He gave a non-committal grunt. The truck jostled again, descending a slope where the dirt turned soft and muddy. The trees thinned, replaced by stumps and fallen logs, evidence of long-abandoned logging operations. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the gloom. Evelyn's heart lurched. She killed her own lights, coasting to a stop behind a cluster of saplings. The approaching vehicle, another motorcycle from the sound of it, rumbled closer, its beam sweeping across the path. "Get down," she hissed to the biker in her passenger seat. He ducked instinctively, though the zip tie limited his movement. Evelyn sank low, adrenaline spiking. If they were spotted, the outlaws might fire immediately, especially seeing a captured comrade bound in her truck. The single motorcycle passed within a few yards, engine echoing across the open space. Through a gap in the foliage, Evelyn glimpsed the rider, a lean figure in leather rifle slung across the back. He didn't slow, disappearing into the darkness beyond. Only a minute. Then did Evelyn exhale. She switched off the radio to minimize noise, then crept forward once more. The ground sloped downward again, leading to a broad, flattened clearing. Likely the old logging camp. Even without the moon's help, she could see outlines of dilapidated cabins and stacks of rotting lumber. A flicker of torchlight or lanterns glowed among them. Evelyn's pulse hammered. This had to be the hideout. She pulled the truck behind a large fallen tree, effectively hiding it from direct view. Turning to the bound biker, she said in a hushed but urgent tone, "Show me where they'd keep a prisoner, quick." He nodded toward a squat building at the far end near a collapsed water tower. Evelyn followed his gaze, fear and determination coalescing into a single imperative. Find Darnell before it was too late. Climbing out of the truck, Evelyn retrieved a flashlight with a red filter designed to preserve night vision. She also grabbed a small first aid pouch and extra ammo, tucking them into her jacket pockets. The biker remained in the passenger seat, feet still zip-tied, hands free, but tethered to the frame. "Stay put," she warned, leveling a stern look at him. "If you try to free yourself or alert anyone, you'll regret it." His brows furrowed, but he nodded. "Better you than them?" he muttered, voice laced with resignation. Evelyn quietly closed the driver's door, scanning the area. The sound of trickling water from the creek mingled with the faint murmur of voices somewhere ahead. She crouched low, using the darkness and abundant cover of tree stumps and fallen logs to inch closer. Her heart pounded in her ears, adrenaline churning in her veins. From behind a half-toppled cabin, she glimpsed a ring of firelight and three figures hunched over crates. Their silhouettes suggested they were armed, but her vantage wasn't good enough to see if one of them might be Darnell. She circled wide each step, deliberate to avoid snapping twigs or rustling foliage. Within minutes, she reached the periphery of the squat building the biker had indicated. A broken sign lay in the dirt near its entrance. The letters "Camp Office" barely legible. This might have once been the logging camp's main office. Now, a heavy wooden door had been refitted with metal reinforcing plates. A single lantern flickered inside through a gap in the wall. Pressing her ear against the worn logs, she picked up the murmur of at least two voices. Possibly more footsteps paced back and forth, and every so often she caught a muffled groan. Her gut twisted. Someone was definitely in distress. The possibility that it was Darnell spurred her onward. She retreated a few steps and located a side entrance or window. Most of the logs were rotting, but the shutter seemed intact, secured from within. Carefully, she probed each seam. One board felt looser than the rest. She pried it up enough to peer inside a cramped room lit by a single lantern on a dusty table. Two outlaws stood over a third figure slumped in a chair, arms bound behind his back. Darnell blood matted his hair, and his right eye was swollen. Even from her limited view, she recognized the pain etched on his face. Rage and relief flooded her simultaneously. He was alive, but clearly hurt. She counted at least 4 weapons in the room, an assault rifle leaning against the table, 2 pistols holstered at the outlaw's hips, and a sawed-off shotgun resting by the door. A direct assault through the front entrance would be suicidal. Evelyn backed away, formulating a plan. She keyed her radio to a whisper. "Tara, I've located Darnell. He's injured inside a small building. 2 hostiles inside with him, more scattered around. No sign of the big boss yet, but I can't rule it out." Tara's breath caught. "Are you going in alone?" A bitter smile tugged at Evelyn's lips. "I have to. Reinforcements aren't coming soon enough." She paused, heart pounding. "Don't worry, I've handled worse. Just be ready for a call if I need backup or medical help." She clicked off before Tara could respond, focusing on her immediate surroundings. A stealthy approach from the side or rear might work. If she could dispatch one outlaw quietly, the element of surprise might grant her a chance to get Darnell out alive. Failure wasn't an option. Not after everything they'd been through to protect Maplewood. This final rescue mission might decide the fate of her friend and mark the beginning of the gang's end. Evelyn circled the small building, stepping lightly on decades-old pine needles and damp leaves. The forest floor muffled her footfalls, a small mercy in this tense operation. She kept a wary eye on the scattered outlaws in the clearing, noting their positions. 2 men paced by the ring of fire, while another seemed to be rummaging through a crate near a dilapidated cabin. If any of them wandered too close, her rescue attempt could unravel in seconds. Reaching the back of the structure, she spotted a rotting section of wood near ground level. It looked large enough to squeeze through if she moved carefully. She knelt and applied gentle pressure. The old boards creaking, but not snapping. Inch by inch, she made an opening wide enough to peer inside. From this angle, she saw a storage room cluttered with abandoned desks, chairs, and a dusty metal filing cabinet. The door to the main room where Darnell was held stood partially ajar. Satisfied that she could slip in quietly, she inched her way through the gap. The smell of mold and stale air hit her immediately. She paused, letting her eyes adjust to the dim interior. A single flickering lantern illuminated the main room, casting wavering shadows on the walls. She could hear the outlaws talking to Darnell, their words laced with threats. One voice in particular, low and menacing, made her ears prick. This might be the boss her captive biker had mentioned. He sounded older, with a gravely tone that carried authority. Staying low, Evelyn crept closer to the ajar door. Through a crack, she saw Darnell bound to the chair, face bruised and swollen, but still upright. The bigger outlaw, stocky build, shaved head, towered over him, demanding information. "Who else is on your team? How many? Where's that sniper lady?" Darnell's head lolled, barely responding. The second outlaw stood off to the side, the arms crossed, watching with narrowed eyes. Her gut churned. Darnell was at the brink, and if these men learned that the sniper lady was right outside, ready to strike, all hell would break loose. She needed a quick, decisive takedown. She glanced at the handful of tools scattered around the storage area. A rusty crowbar, a broken chair leg, some frayed rope. None seemed particularly helpful for a silent approach. Evelyn steadied her sidearm, flicking off the safety. She was a crack shot, but firing into the main room risked a stray bullet hitting Darnell. She needed them away from him, just a foot or two of separation. Summoning her old training, she made a plan. Create a distraction, then move in fast. Slowly, she dragged a dusty chair to the back corner, making sure to keep it out of the direct line of sight from the door. She jammed the broken chair leg between a filing cabinet and the wall, then gave it a sharp tug enough to topple the cabinet with a thunderous crash. The clatter reverberated through the structure, rattling the flimsy walls. Shouts erupted from the next room. "What?" the one outlaw yelled, footsteps pounding across the floor. Evelyn tucked herself into the shadows behind a toppled desk, pistol at the ready. The door to the storage room flew open, and the second outlaw rushed in, assault rifle raised. He hesitated, searching for the source of the noise. That moment's hesitation was all Evelyn needed. She rose in a fluid motion, gripping her sidearm in both hands. A single shot echoed, striking him in the shoulder. He collapsed with a strangled gasp, rifle clattering to the floor. In the main room, the boss roared in alarm. Evelyn darted forward, knowing she had mere seconds to subdue him before he either fired at Darnell or alerted his men outside, bursting into the main room. Evelyn found the boss in mid-pivot, pistol drawn. He was a heavy-set man with lines of age etched into his face, a stark contrast to the younger enforcers. His eyes flared with recognition, as if he instantly realized this must be the sniper lady he'd heard about. Darnell sat bound to the chair in the corner, blinking through swollen eyes. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead. His gaze lit up with a mixture of relief and alarm when he saw Evelyn enter. Without hesitation, the boss fired. Evelyn threw herself behind an upturned table, the bullet splintering the wooden surface. She popped up on the other side, aiming at the boss's center mass. He darted sideways, flipping the table. Darnell had been interrogated at using it as a crude shield. Another shot rang out, digging a crater in the floor near Evelyn's boot. Through the chaos, Darnell strained at his bonds, trying to crawl away from the line of fire. The boss, momentarily distracted by the movement, turned his head. Evelyn seized the opportunity, releasing two quick shots. One grazed the boss's arm, the other lodged in the table. He cursed, stumbling back, adrenaline roaring in her ears. Evelyn advanced. She fired again, aiming low this time to avoid hitting Darnell. The bullet struck the boss's leg, and he collapsed with a guttural cry, pistol tumbling from his grasp. She stepped on it, kicking the weapon across the floor. Darnell coughed, trying to speak. Eve. Evelyn. She rushed to him, heart pounding with relief. With trembling hands, she fumbled for a pocket knife to slice through the rope, binding his arms. Behind her, the boss groaned, clutching his wounded leg. "You think this is over?" He spat, eyes dark with malevolence. "My men will shred you both. You have no idea what's coming." Evelyn ignored him, focusing on freeing Darnell. The rope gave way, and Darnell slumped forward, wincing in pain. She gently pulled his arms free, noticing fresh bruises and blood staining his shirt. "Can you walk?" she asked, voice tight with concern. He nodded weakly, trying to stand. "I'll manage. Get me out of here." Suddenly, the door swung open, revealing another outlaw face twisted in fury. He spotted the boss on the floor and charged, brandishing a shotgun. Evelyn shoved Darnell aside, dropping to one knee and firing a single shot. The man staggered backward, eyes wide, before collapsing with a thud. The shotgun discharged harmlessly into the ceiling, raining splinters of wood onto the floor. Outside, more voices shouted. The gunfire had surely alerted the entire camp. Evelyn could hear the pounding of boots and revving motorcycle engines. She turned to Darnell, hooking an arm around his waist to steady him. "We have to move now." He gritted his teeth, leaning on her lead the way. One last glare at the boss, who lay sprawled, breathing in ragged gasps, told Evelyn everything she needed. He wasn't in any shape to fight, and his operation was about to crumble around him. The question was whether she and Darnell could escape the swarm of outlaws converging on the building. With a deep breath, she helped Darnell hobble toward the exit, her pistol raised. If this gang wanted a final showdown, they were about to get it, but she intended to leave with her friend alive, no matter the odds. Evelyn guided Darnell out the front door, braced for a hail of bullets. Instead, the immediate vicinity lay empty. Likely the men outside had heard the shots and scattered, uncertain of who or what they were up against. She spotted two figures sprinting toward the ring of firelight at the center of the camp, possibly to regroup or grab more weapons. Supporting Darnell, she slipped around the corner of the building, aiming to circle back to where she'd parked the truck. Every step sent jabs of pain through Darnell's injuries, but he gritted his teeth, determined to push forward. "Got any bright ideas?" he murmured, voice raspy. Evelyn scanned the darkness. "Truck's behind that fallen log about 100 yards out. We make it there. We have a chance." A shot rang out, striking the dirt mere feet away. She tugged Darnell behind a rusted metal barrel. Heart pounding, a second shot followed, ricocheting off the barrel with a deafening clang. Carefully peering around the edge, she saw a biker perched on a stack of crates, rifle muzzle flashing as he fired again. Returning fire was risky with Darnell so exposed. Evelyn slid to the ground, letting out a slow breath to steady her aim. She counted to 3, then snapped off 2 shots. The rifleman cried out and slumped, disappearing behind the crates. Another threat neutralized for the moment. A rush of movement to the left caught her eye. Two outlaws approached, each armed with handguns, moving low and fast. Evelyn's chest tightened, fearful of being flanked. She grabbed Darnell's jacket, pulling him along as she ducked behind a half-broken cabin wall. Bullets tore through the rotting wood, spraying splinters everywhere. Frantic voices echoed in the clearing. "Boss is down," someone shouted. Others yelled about the sniper and the traitor. It was clear the gang was in disarray, but disarray could still kill them if they were pinned in place. Darnell coughed, leaning heavily against the wall. "I can fight if you give me a gun," he rasped. She quickly patted her belt, producing a small backup pistol. "Take this," she said, pressing it into his hand. "But only shoot if you have a clear shot. Keep your head down." He nodded. The next few moments blurred into bursts of gunfire and shouts. Evelyn popped out of cover, firing twice more at the approaching pair. One outlaw hit the ground. The other dove behind a log, returning fire blindly. Darnell took aim with shaky arms, but the shot flew wide. Still, it forced the outlaw to stay pinned, buying them precious seconds. Seizing the chance, Evelyn dragged Darnell across a narrow gap between cabins, hard hammering. They zigzagged around piles of debris and old equipment, every step a carefully calculated move to avoid open lines of sight. The acrid smell of gun smoke clung to the night air. Overhead, the moon beamed down on a battlefield, overshadowed by tall pines and old logging remnants. At last, she spotted the fallen log that concealed her truck. Relief and fear collided. Relief that their salvation was in sight. Fear that it might already be compromised. With ragged breath, she urged Darnell forward, her pistol at the ready. The final stretch to the truck would be the most dangerous. If they made it, they might outrun the gang and return to Maplewood. If they failed, the clearing would become their graveyard. A fresh volley of shots rang out from somewhere behind, bullets thudding into the damp earth. Holding her breath, Evelyn sprinted for the pickup, praying that fate would grant them one last measure of luck. The truck came into view, miraculously untouched, though the bound biker in the passenger seat was nowhere to be seen. The door stood ajar, and remnants of the zip tie lay on the seat. Evelyn cursed under her breath. He must have wriggled free and fled, but no time to worry about that now. Her priority was getting Darnell out alive. She yanked open the driver's door, practically hauling Darnell up onto the passenger seat. His face contorted with pain as he settled in. Another bullet whizzed past, smashing the side mirror. Glass tinkled onto the ground. Evelyn ducked, adrenaline spiking anew. Tara, Evelyn barked into her radio. "We're at the truck under heavy fire. Need an exit route over static." Then Tara's urgent reply crackled through. "I'm patching you into the sheriff. He's mobilizing what's left of his men. There's an old logging road south-southeast from your position. If you cut through the clearing and follow the creek, you can loop back to the main highway without crossing the barn area. Marking your coordinates now." Evelyn nodded, even though Tara couldn't see her. "Copy that, we're moving." She jumped behind the wheel, engine roaring to life. The headlights flared against the darkness, revealing two bikers rushing toward them from the left. She stomped the gas gravel, spraying behind the tires as the truck lurched forward. Shots clanged off the tailgate, but the outlaws dove aside as Evelyn barreled through the clearing. She jostled around debris, narrowly avoiding a collapsed shack. Darnell groaned, bracing himself against the dashboard. Each second felt like a delicate balance between raw speed and maintaining control of the truck. Past the ring of firelight, the camp's makeshift perimeter came into view. A ragged fence half broken. Evelyn gunned the engine, smashing through it with a splintering crash. Beyond lay dense forest, but a narrow path snaked down toward the creek. She took it, tires slipping in the mud. Twigs and branches scraped the sides, filling the cabin with harsh scraping sounds. Behind them, headlights appeared as a handful of bikers mounted a pursuit. The roar of their engines drew closer, their lights flickering among the trees. Darnell twisted around, adrenaline lending him a burst of focus. He raised the small pistol Evelyn had given him, aiming out the shattered rear window. He fired twice, forcing the bikers to swerve, though the shots didn't land. Evelyn gritted her teeth. "Hang on!" The path descended sharply, the creek's reflection shimmering just ahead. She knew she had to cross it. Tara's direction said once they were on the other side, they could circle back to Maplewood via an old maintenance road. But the pursuit was relentless, echoing in the night. Gunfire erupted again. One bullet tore into the truck's rear tire, creating a gut-wrenching wobble. Evelyn fought the steering wheel, panic clawing at her. They couldn't afford to lose control now. A half second of clarity prompted her to cut the wheel hard, aligning the truck with a shallow part of the creek. Water splashed across the hood as they plunged in the current. Tugging at the tires, Darnell clutched the dashboard. Face pale, "Go, go," he rasped, as if she needed any encouragement. On the far bank, the muddy incline tested the truck's grip. The tires spun, kicking up water and sludge, but momentum carried them forward. They lurched onto solid ground, headlights illuminating the faint outlines of a dirt track. Evelyn risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The bikers had reached the creek. Hesitating. Their pursuit might end here if they deemed the crossing too dangerous. She prayed it was enough of a deterrent. With the battered truck rattling ominously, she pressed on. Heart thundering in her chest, Maplewood beckoned ahead, an uncertain refuge from the horrors behind them. 15 minutes of tense driving later, the forest began to thin, and the dirt track merged onto a paved road. A battered sign read County Mount Road 27. Its letters faded but legible in the wash of the truck's headlights. Relief flared in Evelyn's chest. She recognized this route. It led northward, eventually linking with the main highway that cut through Maplewood. Next to her, Darnell slumped in the seat, one hand pressed against a deep bruise on his rib cage. Dried blood streaked his brow. Every bump in the road elicited a grimace, yet he stayed alert, peering behind them for any sign of renewed pursuit. So far, it seemed the bikers had either given up or were regrouping. Evelyn reached for her radio. "Tara, we cleared the creek on Route 27, heading back. Darnell's wounded but stable. Any word on the sheriff?" Tara's reply carried a note of relief. "Thank God the sheriff is dispatching EMTs to the Maplewood clinic. They'll be ready for Darnell. Be advised, though, the gang's main convoy was intercepted at the county line. There was a firefight, but some outlaws escaped, the sheriff still rounding up stragglers." Evelyn exhaled slowly. At least some of the gang was being taken down thanks to the roadblock. "We'll see you soon," she murmured, glancing at Darnell. "Hold tight, buddy." His voice was hoarse. "Just another day at the office, right?" he joked weakly. She offered a tight smile, though worry gnawed at her. They had survived, but Maplewood was still under threat until the gang was fully dismantled. The miles passed in tense silence, the battered truck rattling with every pothole. Night began to surrender to early dawn, a pale glow creeping over the horizon. Approaching the outskirts of Maplewood, Evelyn noticed a handful of police vehicles parked near the old diner. A deputy waved them down, directing them toward the clinic just a few blocks away. Evelyn pulled up to the small one-story clinic where paramedics rushed out with a stretcher. She helped Darnell out of the truck, wincing at the pain etched on his face. "Get patched up," she said, gently patting his shoulder. "We'll need you soon enough." He managed a half grin, then allowed himself to be guided inside. As she backed away, the paramedics carried him through the clinic doors. Exhaustion claimed her, but the adrenaline still flickered in her veins. Sheriff Dalton pulled up moments later, stepping out of his cruiser with a grim expression. "We got partial success at the county line," he informed her. "Stop. The box truck seized a load of drugs and firearms. Most of the bikers are in custody, but a few scattered. Word is the boss wasn't with them." Evelyn shook her head. "He was at the logging camp, took a bullet to the leg. If the place wasn't overrun, he might still be there, or his men might have extracted him." Dalton rubbed a hand over his face. "We'll organize a sweep. In the meantime, Maplewood might finally see a break in the violence with their supply chain disrupted. The gang's power is fractured." She wanted to believe him, but she couldn't shake a lingering dread. "Don't underestimate their desperation," she cautioned. "Cornered animals can be the most dangerous." Dalton nodded, acknowledging her point. "You've done more for this town than anyone could have asked, Mrs. Hawkins. But we're not out of the woods yet." Evelyn gave a tired laugh. "I'm just glad the kids are safe. That's what matters." Standing in the clinic parking lot with dawn's early light, glinting off broken glass and bullet-scarred vehicles, she realized how much Maplewood had changed. The war wasn't fully won, but they had struck a decisive blow. Perhaps, just perhaps, the battered community would find a way to heal, and she could return to the simple life she once treasured. Driving a bus full of kids, protecting them from nothing more than everyday scrapes and bruises. 3 days later, the dust in Maplewood began to settle. Sheriff Dalton, bolstered by reinforcements from the state police, led multiple sweeps of the logging camp, the barn, and surrounding hideouts. Most of the gang's leadership was confirmed either dead, injured, or in custody, including the boss, who was found in critical condition with a gunshot wound to the leg just where Evelyn had left him. Dozens of firearms and narcotics were seized, effectively crippling the operation. The town breathed a collective sigh of relief, though signs of trauma lingered. Windows shattered by stray bullets remained boarded up. Parents formed tighter circles around their kids, distrustful of any strangers who rolled into town. The local diner served more coffee than ever as residents gathered to recount the harrowing events, with Evelyn's name often spoken in hushed, grateful tones. In a hospital bed at the Maplewood Clinic, Darnell recovered slowly. His bruised ribs and concussion left him sore and tired, but he insisted on walking laps around the ward whenever the nurses allowed it. On the fourth day, Evelyn visited him carrying a small vase of wildflowers she'd picked along the roadside. "Hey, tough guy," she greeted, placing the flowers on a windowsill. "You almost look human again." He gave a raspy chuckle, one hand gingerly touching the bandages on his forehead. "Guess we both earned a break from gunfights, huh?" She settled into a chair beside his bed. "I think Maplewood earned that break too." They shared a moment of quiet reflection. Outside sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow across the sterile hospital room. Evelyn's mind drifted to the kids she drove each morning, the frightened faces during that deadly ambush, and the relief when none were harmed. She wondered how they would process these events. Perhaps in time, Maplewood's younger generation would only recall these past weeks as a strange, scary blip in their otherwise peaceful childhood. Darnell cleared his throat. "Listen about everything. We did the right thing, but I know it wasn't easy for you. Stepping back into that life," Evelyn frowned, picking at an imaginary thread on her jeans. "I never wanted to handle a gun again, let alone fire one. But we had no choice." He reached over, squeezing her hand gently. "Sometimes good people have to do bad things to protect others." She nodded, eyes glistening with unshed tears. The truth of his words weighed on her. She recalled the outlaws she'd shot, some of them, barely more than kids themselves roped into a life of crime. Yet her responsibility was to Maplewood's children to keep them safe. It was a line she'd never wanted to cross again, but at least she had saved lives in the process. A knock on the door interrupted their somber thoughts. Principal Carson stood there, a tentative smile on his face. "Mind if I come in?" "Not at all," Evelyn said, standing. Carson approached, placing a manila folder on the bedside table. "I'm collecting statements for the school board in the district office," he explained. "But I also wanted to say thanks on behalf of the staff, parents, and especially the kids." Darnell shifted, wincing. "You're welcome. We just did what we had to do." Carson nodded. "If there's anything we can do, anything at all." His gaze flicked to Evelyn, gratitude shining in his eyes. Evelyn forced a small smile. "Just keep those kids safe and happy. Let them be kids for a little longer." The principal promised he would. As he left, the room fell silent again, the air heavy with the aftermath of battles, both physical and emotional. Neither Evelyn nor Darnell knew exactly what the future held, but one thing was certain. Maplewood's quiet nights had been reclaimed, and the children could once more board the school bus without fear. A week later, Evelyn found herself back at the bus depot, standing beside the familiar yellow vehicle that had once been riddled with bullet holes. Repairs were nearly complete with fresh panels and new glass. She ran her fingertips along the smooth paint, memories flooding back of how this bus had become a battleground for the town's innocents. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of new upholstery and disinfectant. For the first time since the chaos began, she felt a sense of closure, perhaps not total peace, but a renewed resolve. The children were safe, the outlaws dismantled or behind bars, and Maplewood was slowly healing. "Mrs. Hawkins," a small voice piped up. She turned to see Lucas, one of the older boys who regularly rode her bus. He stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, a baseball cap perched on his head. Behind him, a few other students lingered, curiosity shining in their eyes. Evelyn offered a warm smile, crouching to meet his gaze. "Hey, Lucas, bus won't be ready for another day or two, I'm afraid. Is your mom picking you up?" He nodded, scuffing his shoe on the pavement. "We heard, what happened? Are you, are you okay?" The question was genuine, a child's concern that tugged at her heartstrings. Her smile softened. "I am, thanks to all of you. Seeing your faces reminds me why we fight so hard to keep things safe." The other kids shuffled closer, some wearing shy smiles, others uncertain. Evelyn reached out and patted Lucas's cap. "We'll be back to normal in no time, I promise." Just then, Principal Carson approached, hands tucked into his pockets. He greeted the children and ushered them toward the main school building for dismissal, giving Evelyn a moment to gather her thoughts. Once they were gone, he turned back to her. "I meant what I said in the hospital," Carson began. "The entire community owes you and your friends a debt of gratitude. The school board has been discussing a commendation." Evelyn waved a hand, feeling heat creep into her cheeks. "That's not necessary. I'm just a bus driver doing her job." Carson laughed softly. "Maybe to you, but to the kids you're a hero, and to me. And I think deep down you understand how important that is." Her throat tightened with emotion. Memories flashed of outlaws brandishing guns, of Darnell battered and bound, of young faces pressed to the bus windows. In terror, she forced those images back. "I never wanted to be a hero. she murmured. I just wanted a quiet life, free from all that violence. Carson reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. Maplewood needs quiet heroes more than ever. And now they know they can count on you. For a moment, a gentle breeze rustled her auburn hair, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the depot. She breathed in the comforting hum of small-town life, distant laughter from the playground, the clanging of a mechanic's tools on the bus's undercarriage. Despite the scars Maplewood bore, it was still home, still worth protecting. Thank you, she finally said, her voice steady. I'll keep doing what I can. Carson nodded, leaving her to inspect the bus in peace. Standing there, Evelyn reflected on how much had changed, how much she had changed, yet, at her core, she was still the Marine sniper who believed in defending the innocent. The difference was that now she wore the mantle of bus driver too, a protector of the town's future. And with the outlaws gone, at least for the time being, Maplewood's children could once again ride the bus under the watchful gaze of a quiet guardian hidden behind the wheel. As the dust settles over Maplewood, Evelyn Hawkins looks out over a town once again, free from fear, knowing justice has prevailed. This retired Marine sniper proved that heroes aren't just found in old John Wayne movies. They're everyday Americans ready to defend what matters most. Sheriff Dalton, inspired by Evelyn's bravery, vows to keep the community safe while families return to normal life with a deeper appreciation of freedom and security. Folks, stories like these remind us of the power of courage, sacrifice, and standing your ground when evil threatens your hometown. What did you think of Evelyn's daring stand? Did it bring back memories of classic westerns or moments from your own life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories and opinions. Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping adventures that celebrate the spirit of American resilience. Let's keep the conversation going.